The day I watched a Mafia boss lose his smile. We were standing under fluorescent lights in a downtown bank, and an old woman with a cane was the one holding the knife to his ego. I was 3 people behind him in the VIP line, clutching a clipboard and pretending to be just another employee on a break. He was at the counter, leaning in, doing that thing he always did. Half smirk, low voice, looking at the private banker like the whole world was a negotiation he'd already won. People call him different things in different neighborhoods. Developers, donors, our generous benefactor. I call him what he is, Marcellus, the man whose money runs through more systems than the city grid. Before I take you deeper, let me set the tone. This is not a fairy tale, viewers. This is a story about money that should have gone to widows and pensions. About quiet ledgers that killed people. And about how one elderly woman forced the scariest man I know to finally look afraid. And yes, it's about me too. Lyriel, 29, numbers geek, daughter of a janitor. Professional expert at picking the wrong men. If you've ever watched a powerful person finally get checked in public, you know that feeling in your chest. That wait, did that really just happen? Moment. That's where we are. And before we go any further, I need you with me. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and get in the comments. Hi viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Because the way this day went, I wish somebody had warned me. The bank was packed with end-of-month noise. Printers whining, kids whining, louder. The soft chime of ticket numbers blinking across the screens. The very important person area tried to pretend it was above all that. Softer carpet, polished desks, a little espresso machine nobody touched when Marcellus was in the building. He stood at the counter in a charcoal suit, tie loose enough to say, "I'm relaxed," neat enough to say, "I own half the block." The private banker, Elliot, had that careful smile on. The one he saved for people whose accounts came with commas. "Like I said, Mr. De Rossi," Elliot murmured, keeping his voice low. "There's a minor hold while our compliance department reviews the wire. A routine delay." There it was. That word. Compliance. I saw the muscle in Marcellus's jaw jump. If you've never seen a man like him irritated, it's quiet. No tantrum. No yelling. Just this small tightening. Like someone pulled a string behind his ear. "Routine," he repeated, voice so smooth you'd almost miss the blade under it. "Your system seems to have an unusually strong interest in me lately." My cheeks got hot even before his eyes slid past Elliot and landed on me. Just for a second. Just enough. Because I was the system, not the whole thing. Obviously, I'm not that important. But I'm the risk analyst who started flagging the pattern of his transfers. The charities, the community funds, the development projects that moved cash in circles that didn't make sense unless you knew what to look for. I was the one who'd written unusual flow, possible layering in a report 6 months ago. I'm also the one who, 3 weeks after that, got quietly promoted into a special client role that came with a raise, an ethics waiver disguised as a bonus clause, and a very simple spoken instruction. "These accounts are sensitive, Lyriel. You're our best. Keep them smooth." Translation: don't ask questions if the money clears. So when Elliot said compliance, I felt my stomach drop, because I knew what should have happened with that wire. And I knew I hadn't filed anything. He turned to his screen, frowning. There's a secondary alert tied to a legacy safety deposit box. It's linked to the same entity as your foundation account. We're just getting a bit of conflict in the system. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. Conflict, huh? The voice was old, soft, but it carried in a way that made half the room glance over. I turned. She couldn't have been more than 5'2", tops. Brown skin, lined and warm. Gray hair tucked under a worn church hat. Cane in one hand, canvas bag on her shoulder. Her dress was pressed. Her shoes had that careful polish older people give to things they've had to make last. I've been paying this bank for that box since before you were shaving, son, she said, tapping her cane against the floor. You told me to come today. Now you telling him, she nodded at Marcellus, and me that your machine is confused. Odetta, Elliot said, pasting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, ma'am. I see your name here. There's just a temporary hold. All this temporary hold for people like him. She cut in, pointing her chin at Marcellus. When I was late on my mortgage by 1 week, y'all mailed me 5 letters and 3 threats. Now, somebody upstairs finally sneezes on his papers, and suddenly, the machines need comfort and explanation. A few people in the regular line snorted. Someone quietly clapped once, then stopped when a security guard turned his head. I felt it in the air. The shift. Banks are places where everybody pretends they don't see the hierarchy. The polished and the desperate stand in the same lobby and act like it's all neutral. Today, the curtain was pulled back a little. Marcellus let out a small, careful laugh. Ma'am, he began, charm sliding into place like a mask. I assure you, this is a technical issue. I'm more than happy to let you go first while they sort it out. He stepped back from the counter. It was a calculated gesture. The powerful man making room for the little old lady. Cameras. Love that. Odetta didn't move. She looked him up and down. Slow. I know you're kind, she said. I used to wipe the floors after men like you left blood on 'em. Money doesn't make you more human, son. It just makes your sins more expensive. His smile broke. Not cracked. Not shifted. It just fell off his face. For the first time since I'd known him. Since the first fancy dinner, the quiet meetings, the long nights over spreadsheets. Marcellus looked like a man who'd just been slapped in a room full of witnesses. Someone in the back coughed to cover a laugh. The security guard shifted awkwardly. Even Elliot's eyes went a little wide as he glanced between them. I saw something else in Marcellus's eyes when Odetta said that. Not just anger, recognition. Like her words hit a memory he didn't want anyone to know existed. Miss Odetta, is it? He said, voice dropping. I respect elders. Truly. But I don't appreciate being talked to like I'm some boy asking for lunch money. She braced both hands on her cane and leaned forward. Then stop acting like one, she said. Open my box. You and your smiling banker friend. Or I take what's in my bag and go to somebody who hasn't been eating from your hand. Elliot swallowed. Miss Odetta, We're just trying to make sure all parties are protected. Your box is tied to an older trust structure that now interfaces with Mr. De Rossi's foundation. Any movement triggers. Your mouth is moving too much, she said. Either bring me a manager or bring me my key. I brought mine. She slipped a chain from around her neck. The tiny battered safe deposit key glinted under the fluorescent lights like it had more weight than the whole stack of binders behind the counter. My terminal pinged. I glanced down at the small tablet in my hand, expecting routine alerts about overdrafts or KYC updates. Instead, a red banner flashed across the top. Alert. Legacy Box 117A. Linked entity under review. Possible fraud. Inheritance dispute. My heart thudded against my ribs. I tapped into the details. Fingers suddenly clumsy. Account holder. Odetta R. Harris. Linked trust. Riverside Workers Benefit Fund. Defunct-related entity. Riverside. Urban Development Foundation. Primary signatory. De Rossi Capital Group. It was all sitting there. A neat line. From a long-dead pension fund to his philanthropic foundation. And we had just thrown an elderly woman and a mafia boss into the same tiny system conflict. I must have made a sound because Marcellus glanced back over his shoulder at me. Our eyes locked. There's a difference between the way a man looks at you when he's flirting and the way he looks at you when he's calculating. I'd seen both on his face. This wasn't flirt. He excused himself from the counter without another word to Odetta and walked toward me, every step measured. The other customers shrank out of his way, like the air moved with him. Office 3, he said quietly, not breaking eye contact. Now, I swallowed and followed, passing Odetta as I went. She caught my hand for half a second, grip surprisingly strong. You look like your father, she murmured. He used to stand in lines like this, trying to get someone to care about workers' money. Don't let them scare you out of whatever's in your bones, baby. My throat closed. I wanted to ask her a dozen questions. How did she know him? What did she mean? Workers' money. But Marcellus was already at the glass-walled office, holding the door. Inside, the noise of the bank muffled. He shut the door with a soft click. For a moment, he just looked at me. Up close, you could see the stress lines around his eyes, the faint scar on his jaw, the way his tie had been adjusted and readjusted so many times the knot was starting to look tired. You saw the alert, he said. Not a question. Yes, I said. I did. What did it say? I hesitated. That your foundation is linked to a defunct workers' benefit fund through that woman's box. Possible fraud, inheritance, dispute. He stepped closer, not looming, but near enough that I could smell his cologne. Clean, expensive, with something darker under it. Those words, he said softly, are going to wake up people you don't want to wake. Auditors, prosecutors, men who earn their bonuses by dragging people like me into hearings. Maybe that's what should have happened a long time ago, I said before I could stop myself. His jaw flexed. You do realize, he said, voice still low, that 6 months ago you were the first one to write my name in a little red box and call it unusual flow. You lit this match Lyriel. Don't act surprised. The fire reached the curtains. I did my job, I said. You're the one who put your money in dead men's accounts and called it charity. For a second, the corner of his mouth twitched like I'd amused him. Then, it smoothed again. I'm not here to argue semantics, he said. I'm here to stop a problem before it becomes a case. That box, that woman, those words on your screen, they all connect to a time when people who worked with their hands thought this city would take care of them. It didn't. Now, their ghosts are on my paperwork. And that can't stand. You mean it can't stand if you want to keep smiling in public? I shot back. His eyes darkened. You think this is about my image? He asked. If that fund gets fully investigated, some very old, very dirty money trails reopen. Not just mine. Men who make me look like a choir boy will start asking who let that happen. You're on that list now, whether you like it or not. A chill crawled up my spine. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm describing the room you walked into when you started flagging my transfers, he said. You can't unsee the walls now. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothed it on the desk between us. A photo. My mother, standing outside the clinic, where she does night shifts, holding a thermos and smiling at someone off camera. My breath left my lungs. You have her watched? I whispered. I have you watched, he said. She is part of that. So when I tell you that whatever is in that old woman's box can't be allowed to blindside me, understand that I am not just talking about my discomfort. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper now. Fix this, he murmured, or you and your mother will be the ones paying a bill you didn't run up. My tablet buzzed in my hand. I tore my eyes away from his, long enough to glance down. A new alert had popped up over the red banner. Account flagged for escalation. Regulatory review pending. External agency notified. External agency. That meant this wasn't just an internal, we'll quietly clean it up issue anymore. Someone, somewhere, had either pushed the wrong button or finally decided to pay attention. My heart pounded so loudly, it drowned out the hum of the lobby. Outside the office, I could see Odetta through the glass, still standing at the counter, her cane planted like a stake. Inside, I had a crime boss inches from my face, my mother's picture on the desk, and a system alert that basically said, "You have run out of time." I looked back up at him. If I try to smooth this, I said slowly, I become part of it. On paper. Forever. He held my gaze. You already are, he said. The question is whether you're smart enough to write yourself a way out. Viewers, tell me in the comments, what would you do, standing in that office with that man and that photo and that blinking alert? Because I stood there with my palms sweating, my heart in my throat, and I had no idea that the word inheritance in that little red box was about to drag my father's ghost into the room too. And that old woman with the cane? She wasn't just here for her box. She was here for my past and his. I didn't answer him right away. I just stood there, staring at my mother's face on that cheap, grainy printout, the blinking red alert, and the man who could make this all vanish with a phone call, or make it worse with the same phone call. You're shaking, he said quietly. I'm thinking, I shot back. Same thing. At first, he said. He stepped around the desk, close enough that the edge pressed against my hip. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. His presence did what his hand would have done to most people. Pinned them. You want me to fix this, I said. What does that even mean? Delete the alert? Tell compliance it was a glitch? Start shredding? He watched my face like he was reading a chart. How did you get into risk? He asked, instead of answering. You don't look like somebody who grew up wanting to save banks. That's not a real question, I said. It is, he replied, because if I'm going to ask you to take a step that can't be undone, I need to know what kind of person I'm pushing. I laughed once, sharp. You don't push people, I said. You move numbers. People just happen to be attached to them. He didn't argue. He just folded his arms and leaned back against the desk, eyes not leaving mine. Fine, I said, more to my own heartbeat than him. You want to know how I got here? It didn't start with you. It started with a man a lot more ordinary and a lot more useless. His brows lifted a fraction. You got 5 minutes, he said. After that, we're back on the clock. A year ago, my life was smaller. Same city. Different angle. I worked in collections back then, in a windowless floor where the lights hummed and the chairs squeaked and people cried on the phone for a living. Miss Ortiz, I promise, we'll get it current next month. I understand, sir, but if you don't make a minimum payment by Friday, the account will go to charge off, and it was like being paid to watch people drown and tell them exactly how much water they were allowed to swallow. At night, I went home to a one-bedroom place that smelled like old carpet and burnt toast. I'd sit at the wobbly kitchen table and juggle my own bills, trying to convince my student loan servicer that hardship meant something more than we'd like you to click this link. There was a man, of course. There always is, in these stories. His name doesn't matter. Let's call him what he was, a lesson. He worked in sales, which turned out to be code for using other people's names to open lines of credit. He was funny and warm and good with my mother. He knew how to bring flowers and apologize and talk about our future like it was already paid for. When my car died, he offered to help me refinance. When my credit card limits jumped, he called it good news. When I found out he'd maxed 2 of them buying inventory for a startup, he swore it was temporary. He left the day I told him I couldn't keep taking calls for a living. Left quietly. Just stopped answering, took the extra house key and the good towels and the charger to the laptop he'd borrowed in my name. I found the collection letters a week later, addressed to me. By the time I dragged myself out of that mess, my credit was wrecked, my savings gone, and my tolerance for charming men at absolute 0. I moved into risk, not because somebody spotted my genius, but because there was an internal posting, and my supervisor was tired of watching me argue with scripts. Go look at numbers instead of listening to them, she said. You're good at patterns. Maybe you can stop some of this before it starts. Risk was a different universe. Less crying, more spreadsheets, less begging, more cold distance. We sat 3 floors above my old apartment, literally and figuratively, looking down on the people whose voices I used to hear through static. Our job was to predict failure and price it. I was good at it. Too good. Within 6 months, I'd flagged 3 small fraud rings, caught a charity skimming debit cards from volunteers, and identified a payday lender using fake identities to launder cash. For every case that got acted on, 2 got quietly shelved. Not material enough. Client has powerful friends. Will monitor it. That's where I saw his name. The first time. Not Marcellus, of course. Not the one whispered in bodegas and back rooms. On paper, he was M. De Rossi, principal of something called the Riverside Urban Development Foundation. The file landed in my queue as a routine periodic review. Big account, big donations, lots of positive press. The pattern underneath was wrong. Money in from Shell LLCs. I didn't like the look of. Money out to community initiatives that seemed to exist only on glossy brochures. Loops between his accounts and older trusts that pre-dated him. One of them had a name that made my eyes stick. Riverside Workers Benefit Fund. Defunct. I opened it. Found a history of small deposits over decades. Long-term care workers, janitors, nurses, orderlies, my mother's kind of people. Then, slowly, the small names stopped. The fund was reorganized, rolled into a modernized community vehicle, and the payouts started going mostly to corporate entities. I wrote the note because it felt like screaming into a well was better than staying silent. Unusual flow. Possible diversion from original beneficiaries. Recommend review. 3 days later, my manager asked me into a conference room. Not the small one, with the flickering light. The big one, with glass walls and a view of the river. There was a man in a suit there I'd never seen before. He shook my hand, like we were closing a deal I hadn't agreed to yet. Betrayal, he said. We've been very impressed with your attention to detail. 5 minutes later, I had an offer letter. New title: Senior Risk Consultant, Strategic Clients. New salary. Enough to make my stomach twist. New non-disclosure clauses, thick enough to be a weapon. I told myself it was a promotion for being smart. I told myself it was my reward for surviving the last mess. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, sitting at a corner table in a restaurant I couldn't afford, that I found out who I'd really been hired for. He walked in late, took off black leather gloves, shrugged out of a coat that cost more than my student loans, sat down across from me with the easy entitlement of someone who knew every exit and every camera angle. Betrayal, he said, tasting my name like he was testing how it fit on his tongue. Thank you for meeting so late. I heard you like patterns. You heard wrong, I said. I like rules. He smiled. That slow, careful thing he wore in the bank. You flag my accounts, he said. You could have kept your head down. You didn't. That tells me you care about where numbers go, not just where they come from. You sound like you think that's a compliment, I said. It's why you're here, he replied. I don't need another coward. I need someone who'll tell me when the floor is rotting under my feet before the building collapses. He talked about community projects, about doing good with dirty money, about cutting out men worse than him by beating them at their own game. He didn't pretend to be clean. He just claimed to be cleaner than the alternatives. "Work with me," he said, fingers resting lightly on the rim of his glass. "Make sure my legitimate fronts stay bulletproof. You get paid, your mother never sees another collection call, and you get to steer millions into places where they might actually help someone." There was a little voice screaming in my head the whole time. "This is how it starts. This is how you end up on the wrong side of a courtroom PowerPoint." But the other voice was louder, the one that remembered my mother counting out grocery money at the kitchen table, the one that knew the bank would keep his accounts anyway, with or without my notes. If I said no, someone else would say yes. If I said yes, maybe I could at least stop the worst of it. So I did what tired, hurt, rational people do. I compromised. I took the job. I learned which questions to ask out loud and which to keep in my private notebook. I learned the difference between what we could prove and what we knew. I watched my inbox fill with words like accepted risk and client relationship priority, and I watched his money move. Week after week, month after month, until that red banner popped up in the bank lobby, and the ghosts we hadn't paid came back with interest. "You think I haven't seen men like your Pearson before?" I said, dragging myself back to the office with Marcellus. There's always some VP who decides other people's pensions look better on a ledger under his bonus column. "Pearson works for the bank," he said. "Not for me. Funny how his override benefited you," I snapped. Something flickered behind his eyes. "You think I sat at a desk and asked him to steal from nurses?" he asked, quietly. "You think I wouldn't remember signing my name to that?" "You signed your name to enough," I said. "At some point, not knowing every detail stops being an excuse and starts being convenient for a heartbeat." I thought I'd gone too far. His shoulders tensed, his hands flexed at his sides. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Maybe so," he murmured. "Maybe I trusted a man I shouldn't have because it lined up with what I wanted. Maybe I told myself, if the projects got built, the math would work itself out." He looked past me, toward the blurred outline of Odetta through the glass. "You flag this trust," he said. "Then an external agency wakes up right when an old woman shows up with a key and a grudge. That's not coincidence. That's timing. You wanted someone like me," I said. "You've got a problem that looks like me." "That's irony." He huffed out half a laugh, humorless. "Here's what happens next," he said, voice tightening. "You're going to go back out there. You're going to tell them the alert is under internal review and that they can't deny Miss Harris access based on a hold that isn't fully adjudicated. That buys us time." "Time for what?" "For me to find out who escalated this and why," he said. "And for you to decide whether you're going to keep pretending you can stay neutral in a war you've already stepped into." "I'm not your soldier," I said. "You're not theirs either," he replied. "Not unless you want to be the name they use to excuse whatever they do next." The tablet buzzed again in my hand. This time, it wasn't a system alert. It was a text. "Unknown number. You don't know me, but I knew your father. Ask that old woman who stole your inheritance." The room tilted, just a little. My father had been dead for over 20 years. He'd left us nothing but debts and silence. At least, that's what I'd been told. Marcellus watched my face change. "What is it?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just turned the screen so he could see. He read the message. Then he looked at me in a way that made my skin prickle. "You still think this is just about me?" he asked, softly. "About my smile in a bank line?" He nodded toward the lobby. "That woman out there didn't just come for her box," he said. "She came to bring bodies out of closets. Some of them have your last name." My fingers tightened around the tablet until my knuckles hurt. "Fix the hold," he said. "Buy me time. Talk to her. Figure out what she knows. And for your sake, do it before the people on the other end of that external review decide. Inheritance dispute is their new favorite phrase." Outside, I could see Odetta shifting her weight, adjusting her bag, her gaze cutting now and then toward the office door. I opened my mouth to tell him no, to tell him I was done patching leaks in a ship he punched holes in. What came out was, "I'll talk to her," because sometimes, viewers, the first step toward revenge looks an awful lot like cooperation, and the first person you plan to take down is the one standing closest to you. I walked back out into the humming bank lobby, heart pounding, his eyes burning between my shoulder blades, and headed straight for the woman who had just cracked his mask, and apparently my past. Odetta didn't wait for me to speak. "You took long enough," she said, as I stepped out of the office. "That man doesn't know how to have a short conversation, does he?" Her tone was light. Her eyes weren't. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "We had to clarify some things." She tapped her cane once on the tile. "The way he looked at you through that glass, I'd say you're more than some things to him." Heat crept up my neck. "It's not like that." "Didn't say it was," she replied. "Sit down, baby. My knees want a chair." We moved to a small seating area by the windows. 2 low armchairs and a table with old magazines no one read. The VIP line buzzed on behind us. Elliot kept darting glances in our direction, clearly hoping someone else would handle whatever this was. Odetta lowered herself into the chair with a soft grunt and patted the one across from her. "Now," she said, folding her hands over the handle of her cane, "let's talk about your father." My heart stuttered. "You—" I swallowed. "You really knew him?" She smiled, the kind that cut right through the years on her face. "Knew him?" She said, "Girl, your daddy did my taxes for 15 years, and never once let me lie to myself about how broke I was. Very irritating man. Very good man." "He was an accountant?" I asked, the word tasting strange in my mouth. "My whole life. Your father had been shorthand for the man who left us with debt." "Small time," she said. "Little office off 125th. Smelled like coffee and cheap printer ink. He did returns for nurses, janitors, cafeteria ladies. Charged us barely anything. Said the city stole enough. He didn't need to." My throat tightened. He never talked about any of that at home," I said. "Home was where he tried not to bring the anger," she replied. "Didn't always work. Especially at the end." "At the end," I repeated. She watched me carefully. "How much did your mama tell you?" she asked. "That he died. In a robbery," I said. "Wrong place. Wrong time. We had bills he couldn't pay. That's all." Odetta sucked her teeth. Half a truth is a lie with better shoes. She leaned in a little. "Listen to me, Lyriel," she said. "Your father was stubborn. He believed if you showed people the wrongs on paper, they'd fix them. Trusts is one kind of paper. Wills is another. That fund they tied my box to, Riverside Workers' Benefit, he helped set that up. My fingers dug into my knees." "What?" "He was on the advisory committee," she said. "He helped the union boys and the hospital ladies understand what they were signing, tried to make sure the language was fair. Then one day, new men started coming to the meetings. Slick hair, slick shoes, slick smiles, talking about modernizing the fund, saying they could invest it, make it work harder." She glanced toward the bank's logo on the wall. "They had bank people with them," she went on. "VPs with nice watches. And one younger one who didn't say much, just watched. Tall, sharp. Had that same look your friend in the charcoal suit has. Like he's always counting exits. Marcellus." I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. "Your father didn't like their math," Odetta said. He asked questions. Where the money would go, who would oversee the new vehicle, how much risk we were really taking. The bank man smiled and did that thing they do. Slide brochures across the table instead of answers. "That sounds right," I muttered. "One night, your daddy came by my place with a folder thick enough to break a table," she said. "Said he'd found things that didn't make sense. That the fund was already being tapped by shell companies before any of us had voted. Said some signatures looked copied. Forgeries." I whispered. "Maybe," she said. "He talked about going to regulators. To the DA. Said he'd be damned if he let these people steal nurses' retirements to build glass boxes in the sky." My stomach clenched. "And then?" I asked. "And then he got robbed," she said flatly. "In a nice neighborhood that didn't have a lot of robberies. They said it was random. His briefcase went missing. So did that folder. For a second, the world outside the bank windows blurred. Cars, people, the bus stop, all streaks. He died over this," I said. She shook her head, slowly. "He died because men like that can't stand little men messing with their ledgers," she said. "This," she tapped her bag, "this is what he left behind." "You have his papers?" I asked. Too loud. A few heads turned. Odetta's eyes narrowed. "Lower your voice," she said. "You want to put a neon sign over my head?" "Sorry," I whispered. She nodded. "After he died, some of the committee members came to me," she said. "Said your father had mailed out copies of certain documents, just in case. I was one of the in cases. I put them in that box. Every statement, every letter, every note he scribbled. Figured one day, the right fight would show up." "And you think this is the right fight?" I asked. "I think," she said quietly, "that when the same bank that ignored us for years suddenly starts acting nervous, when the same names that shut down your father's complaints pop up on a man like DeRossi's paperwork, And when I see his risk, analyst looks, just like the kid who used to wait for her daddy by the office copier. Yeah. I think it's time. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the bank fading into the background. Why didn't you tell my mother? I asked. Why didn't anyone? She had a child and a job and a grief so heavy it bent her spine, Odetta said. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the living is not hand them a war they can't afford to fight. Your father picked his moment. He sent what he could. Now it's your turn to decide what you can carry. I pressed my fingers to my eyes, trying to catch my breath. Viewers, I wanted to say, this is where the script flips. This is where you find out the debts in your life were never just numbers on a page. They were choices people made to let you suffer, and other people made to try to stop it. If you've ever found out your family was keeping a bigger story from you for your own good, tell me in the comments how that felt. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because where this goes from inheritance dispute to quiet revenge, you're not going to want to miss that line. So what now? I asked, hoarsely. You open the box, hand it all to an external agency. We trust the same system that ignored him before. That worked out great last time. Her mouth twisted. I didn't say trust them, she said. I said use them. Same difference, I muttered. No, she said sharply. Difference is you. This time, she pointed her cane at me. Your father went in alone, she said. You're not alone. You got access. You got that man's ear, whether you like it or not. And you got me. You think he's going to help? I asked, glancing toward the office. You think Marcellus wants any of this opened? I think he wants to live, she said. And I think if these papers show what I think they do, those bigger men he mentioned are going to need a scapegoat. You know how to keep from being the scapegoat, baby. Don't be in the picture, I said. Or, she countered, make sure the picture shows the whole room. It was almost dark by the time I left the bank. We'd convinced Elliot, barely, to log the alert as under review. And hey, schedule a supervised box. Visit for Odetta pending clarification. It bought us 48 hours. Maybe. Odetta squeezed my hand by the doors. Come with me when they open it, she said. Your eyes need to see what his did. I will, I promised. Good girl, she murmured. And call your mother. Tell her the past is walking around again. Outside, the city had that flat, gray-orange sky that promised rain but hadn't delivered it yet. Traffic was starting to thicken. People in suits hurried home. People in uniforms hurried to their second job. I didn't go home. I went to him. His office was on the 22nd floor of a building that pretended it was entirely respectable. The directory in the lobby said things like Urban Renewal Initiative and Civic Partnership Council. His company had the nicest logo. I flashed my badge to the guard, rode the elevator up, and walked down the quiet hall to the frosted glass doors that said De Rossi Capital Group. Inside, it smelled like money and lemon cleaner. His assistant, a woman with braids, sharp eyeliner, and the kind of eyes that missed nothing, looked up. He's in, she said before I could speak. Been pacing since your text." "Great," I muttered. "Love that for me." She smirked, then nodded toward the inner door. "He told me to send you straight through." He was at the window when I stepped in, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, hands in his pockets. The city sprawled out behind him in lights. "You took a while," he said without turning. "I was busy finding out my father died for your paperwork," I said. He pivoted then. Whatever comeback he'd had ready died when he saw my face. "What did she tell you?" he asked. "That she knew him," I said. "That he tried to stop what happened to that fund. That he mailed her copies of documents. That he died in a robbery, and his folder disappeared." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "I didn't order that," he said quietly. "You keep saying things like that," I replied. "Like I didn't know. I didn't sign that piece myself. At what point does I didn't stop mattering?" He walked toward me slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "Sit," he said, nodding at the chair by his desk. "I'm not your employee right now," I shot back. "Then sit like someone who doesn't want to fall over," he said. "You're shaking again." I hated that he was right. I dropped into the chair, my legs suddenly heavy. He leaned on the edge of the desk in front of me, crossing his arms. "Your father's name is in some old files," he said. "I remember it." He was loud in meetings. Used words like promise in rooms where everybody else said projection. "You were there," I said, stomach flipping. "In those meetings, I was the young shark in the corner," he admitted. "Working for men who thought your fund would make a nice foundation stone for their empire. I didn't know your father had mailed anything out. I didn't know your name would ever be attached to this. So you let them drain the fund," I said. Looked the other way. "Took your cut." "No," he said sharply. "I didn't touch that trust. I made my own deals, my own compromises. They used my companies to launder what they'd already taken. When I stepped out and built D. Rossi, I told myself I was restructuring, helping neighborhoods, making up for the original theft. And how much of that was real?" I asked. He didn't answer for a moment. "Enough that I could sleep some nights," he finally said. "Not enough that an investigation wouldn't connect me to the theft. Those ledgers in her box, if they show what I think they do, there are signatures on there that belong to dead men, and mine close enough to theirs to get caught in the same net." "Good," I said, surprising both of us. "Maybe you should get caught." His eyes darkened. "You want me in prison?" he asked. I thought about my mother, the brick through Odetta's metaphoric window, the text about my inheritance. "I want someone to be in prison," I said. "I'm just not sure if it has to be you." Silence stretched between us, taut as wire. "You're angry," he said. "You're observant," I snapped. "You're not just angry at me," he went on. "You're angry at him. At the bank. At whoever sent that text. At every man who saw your father as a nuisance instead of a warning." He took a breath. "So, aim properly," he said. "Don't just swing at the closest target." I laughed. A hard, humorless sound. "Spoken like a man who doesn't want to be the one bleeding," I said. Spoken like someone who's been both the blade and the neck, he replied. We stared at each other. Something tired and raw flickered in his expression. You think I like this? He asked quietly. You think I enjoy wondering which file from 15 years ago is going to crawl out of a vault and drag me into a courtroom? I made choices. Some I can justify, some I can't. But I don't steal from old women at teller windows. Not anymore. Not anymore is doing a lot of work in that sentence, I said. He pushed off the desk and walked around behind it, dropping into his chair. He gestured at the second monitor. Show me what you saw, he said. Walk me through it, like I'm your supervisor. And you still think the system cares? Something in me wanted to refuse. Something else. The part that grew up watching my mother add tips on diner receipts like they were miracles. Knew that if I wanted quiet justice, it wasn't going to come from yelling alone. So I stood, stepped behind the desk, and pulled up the file. We went through it, line by line. I showed him the old deposits, the stop in individual payouts, the reroute to corporate shells, the executive override with Pearson's name on it. He didn't interrupt much. Sometimes he cursed under his breath. Sometimes his fingers dug into the armrests. At one point, his hand brushed mine on the mouse, and a jolt shot up my arm like static. I snatched it back too fast. Sorry, he said. It's fine, I lied, my pulse tripping over itself. We ended up standing shoulder to shoulder, leaning over the screen. His cologne mixed with the faint smell of my own drugstore body spray and the coffee he'd abandoned hours ago. What do you want out of this, Lyriel? He asked, eventually. Not in theory. In practice. If you had the power to set the terms, what would justice look like? I thought about it. Restitution, I said slowly. Real restitution. Money back into the hands of the people it was stolen from. Names cleared. Systems changed. So this can't happen again without alarms that actually mean something. And punishment? He asked. Consequences, I said, for the ones who signed off, who forged signatures, who profited. Not just a fine they can write off as cost of doing business. Something that hurts enough. They remember it when they look in the mirror. He nodded once. And me? He asked. I glanced at him. What about you? I asked. Where do I fall on that list? He said. Restitution? Punishment? Both? Neither. You tell me, I said. You were there. You built part of this mess. How much are you willing to lose to fix it? He didn't answer with words. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, like he was counting backward from a number only he knew. When he opened them, he looked smaller, more human, less myth. I can move money back, he said, quietly, through other entities. Rebuild some of what was taken. I can deliver names and documents on the ones who orchestrated the original theft. Some are still alive, some aren't, but their signatures are. And you? I pressed, and I can stand in front of a camera and say, I was part of a system that failed people like your father, he said, that my companies benefited from decisions that never should have been made, that I'm redirecting those profits permanently. My breath caught. You'd actually admit that? I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Confession is cheaper than a trial, he said, and easier to spin. I rolled my eyes. There it is. But, he added, voice softening, there's a difference between doing the right thing because you're cornered and doing it because someone finally told you the truth to your face. That woman did that in the lobby. You're doing it now. He looked at me, and something shifted in the air. You both make it very hard to hide, he said. We were close enough now that I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the thin white scar near his temple, the tired circles under his eyes. You're not supposed to talk like this, I said quietly. Men like you are supposed to stay vague. Mistakes were made. Men like me don't usually have people like you in their offices, he replied. I don't know who moved first. 1 second, we were standing side by side, staring at a screen full of numbers that had ruined lives. The next, we'd turned toward each other, and the distance between us felt like a question begging to be answered. His hand lifted, slow, giving me time to step back. I didn't. He brushed his knuckles along my jaw, so lightly, it might have been an accident, if not for the way his eyes dropped to my mouth. My breath caught. This is a bad idea, I whispered. The worst, he agreed. His thumb grazed the corner of my lip. Every nerve in my body lit up. You're my client, I said, even as my hand found his wrist, fingers curling around warm skin and a hard pulse. My problem. He smiled, small and broken. And you, he said, are the only person in this building who talks to me like I'm not a god or a monster. His forehead dipped toward mine. For a heartbeat, our noses brushed. His breath was warm, edged with coffee and something darker. I closed my eyes. We hovered there, right on the edge. My brain screamed at me to pull away. My body leaned in like it had already voted. He stopped. I felt the moment he chose not to close the distance. He exhaled, a shudder against my lips, and pressed his mouth to my forehead instead. Soft, almost reverent. It broke something in me more than a reckless kiss would have. He stayed there for a second, his hand at the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair. Then he stepped back, jaw tight. I'm not going to be another man who uses what you feel to buy what he wants, he said hoarsely. I opened my eyes. And what do you think I feel? I asked, voice shaky. He gave me a look that said we both knew the answer, and neither of us liked it. Enough, he said. Enough that I don't want to find out where the line between anger and this starts to blur for you. Silence settled between us, heavy and fragile. You should go home, he added. Sleep. Call your mother. Come back tomorrow with a clear head. We'll plan with Odetta then. I wanted to argue. I nodded instead. At the door, I paused and looked back. He was already at the window again, shoulders squared, hands in his pockets. From behind, he looked like every rich man who'd ever decided neighborhoods were his to rearrange. But I'd just seen the crack under the paint. That scared me more than his power. The hallway outside his office was dimmer now, most of the staff gone. The cleaning crew's cart squeaked down the far end. My heels clicked on the polished floor. I hit the elevator button and checked my phone. 3 missed messages from my mother. 1 from an unknown number. I opened the last one first. It was a photo. Me and Odetta, sitting in those chairs by the bank window. My face turned toward her. Her cane pointed at me, taken from a distance, through glass. Under it, a text. Nice choice of allies, Ms. Ortiz. Boss forgot to mention how dangerous old women can be. We'll be in touch. The elevator doors slid open behind me, with a soft ding. For a second, I just stared at the screen, pulse hammering, realizing 2 things at once. Someone besides Marcellus was watching us, and whoever they were, they knew exactly who mattered to me now. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch, in the dark, the city's glow slipping through the blinds, staring at that photo, until my phone dimmed and went black on its own. Me and Odetta, caught through glass like animals in a zoo. Nice choice of allies, Ms. Ortiz. Boss forgot to mention how dangerous old women can be. We'll be in touch. The words crawled under my skin. If it were just Marcellus, I could at least see him coming. He liked eye contact with his threats. This was someone in the walls. I finally gave up around 2 in the morning and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, voice scratchy. Baby? You know what time it is? I know, I said. Sorry. I just needed to hear you breathe. She went quiet. You had one of those days, she said softly. That obvious? You only call like this when you think the floor's about to open up, she said. Talk. I thought about lying, telling her it was just work stress, some vague nonsense about deadlines and clients. Then I pictured that text, that distant photo, the way Odetta had said, "Tell your mother the past is walking around again." Did Dad ever talk to you about a fund? I asked. Something for workers. Riverside. Anything like that? Silence. Heavier this time. Why are you asking? She finally said. Because I saw his ghost today, I answered. With a cane and a bank key. She exhaled. Long and shaky. I was hoping it would die with us, she said. What? Exactly? I pressed. Because right now, it's living in my inbox, and it knows what I look like from across a room. She hissed in a breath, muttering something under it. I'm pretty sure she'd ask God to forgive later. Your father wanted to be a hero, she said, after a moment. He believed if you proved something was wrong, the right people would fix it. He didn't understand that sometimes the right people are the ones doing the wrong in nicer suits. That's not an answer, I said. It's the only one I know how to give at 2 in the morning, she replied. All I know is he got involved with some retirement fund for hospital workers, got loud about it, got dead. After my stomach clenched. You knew, I whispered, about the fund? I knew it made him come home with that look in his eyes. She said, the one where he'd stare at the bills on the table and say, they can't do this to people. Like it was new. I knew he mailed out envelopes for safekeeping. I knew the night before he died, he told me if anything happened to him, to take you and run to my sister in Florida. You never told me that part, I said. You were 10. she shot back. What was I supposed to say? Daddy died trying to fight rich thieves and lost. Yes, I said, voice cracking. Maybe, she sighed. Or maybe I was supposed to let you have one parent who didn't die with a target painted on her, she said. We can argue about it later. Right now, tell me why you're asking and why you sound like you're hiding in a closet. I swallowed. I'm involved, I said, with that same fund. Not on purpose. It just wrapped around into something else. And there's a man. Of course, there's a man, she muttered. There's always a man. With your timing, it's not like that. I lied automatically. She went for the jugular. Does he make your stomach feel like you're on a roller coaster and make your rent look small? I closed my eyes. Yes, then it's exactly like that, she said. Listen to me carefully, Leary. Whatever happened to your father? It happened because he stepped in front of people who had no intention of slowing down. If you're going to step there too, you either do it with more armor or you don't do it at all. What if the armor is part of the problem? I asked. What if the only shield I have is the man driving the truck? She went quiet for a beat. Then you better make sure he knows whose life is under his wheels, she said. And you better not give him your heart while you're at it. That's too much leverage in one direction. Too late, I wanted to say. Instead, I said, I'll be careful. Careful would have been staying in collections, she snorted. You're past careful. But you better be smart. And you better keep that old woman close. Women who live long enough to get that kind of angry? They're usually right. We talked a little longer. About nothing and everything. Her foot pain. My rent. The price of eggs. We didn't say, I'm scared out loud. We didn't have to. The next morning, the bank was already buzzing when I walked in. 2 news vans were parked across the street. That was new. I slipped in through the employee entrance, badged through, and headed straight for my floor. My inbox was a mess of overnight messages, system alerts, internal memos, one bland note from external compliance liaison, confirming receipt of escalated legacy trust matter. No name, no phone number, just an address that might as well have said, "We're watching." My stomach flipped. At around 9, my desk phone rang. Ortiz, I said. Lobby, Odetta's voice replied. They tried to make me an appointment next week. I told them I already had one with you today. You're here? I asked, jolting up. Now? Unless I started hallucinating buses, she said. Get down here before they remind me why I hate polite thieves more than rude ones. I grabbed my tablet and headed for the elevator. On the way down, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked like a woman in a bank commercial. Blazer, neat bun, professional scowl, acceptable, harmless. I wondered how many people had underestimated my father because he looked like the janitor he was. When the door slid open, the lobby hit me with a wall of sound. Phones ringing, kids complaining, the low murmur of 100 conversations. And there, by the same chairs as yesterday, was Odetta. Same cane, same bag, same look that said she missed nothing. Next to her stood a man I'd never seen before. He was in a suit that fit too well to be off the rack, open collar, no tie. Dark hair slicked back just enough, beard lined sharp. He was smiling down at her, like he'd invented the word charm. My skin prickled. Something about his eyes. Too bright, too amused, too aware. I approached, slowly. "Miss Harris," I said, "you beat me here, and this young man beat you to me." She replied dryly. Said, "He's with security." The man turned his smile on me. Up close. It was even worse. The kind of smile that never quite reached his pupils. "Ms. Ortiz," he said, like we'd met at a party and I'd already bored him. "Pleasure." "I'm Renzo." He didn't offer a last name. Didn't need to. Every cell in my body filed him under problem immediately. "We've contracted with the bank to provide some additional security oversight for certain high-profile clients," he said. "Given the noise around Mr. De Rossi's accounts, we thought it wise to keep an eye on anything connected. For everyone's safety." He said safety, like it was optional. "For whose safety?" I asked. His smile didn't budge. "Yours," he said. "His. Miss Harris's. External agencies get jumpy when they smell blood. Sometimes they swing wider than they intend." He tilted his head, studying me. "You look tired," he added lightly. "Long night." My throat tightened. The text flashed in my mind. "Nice choice of allies, Miss Ortiz. Boss forgot to mention how dangerous old women can be." I forced my shoulders not to stiffen. "Work has been busy," I said. "Of course." He nodded. "You're at the center of quite the little storm." He turned back to Odetta. "Ms. Harris," he said, putting just enough warmth in his voice to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. "We're just here to make sure no one misuses your information. Plenty of bad actors would love to weaponize old accounts like yours to cause trouble for good men." Odetta snorted. "Good men don't need this many guards," she said. "And I'd rather my money cause trouble than your friends enjoy a quiet theft." I almost smiled. Renzo's jaw ticked for a second. Then the charm snapped back on. "Well," he said, "we'll let the legal folks sort out what's theft and what's progress. In the meantime, I'd feel a lot better if we could move this conversation somewhere more private." He nodded toward the hallway leading to the safe deposit vault. "That's my job," I said evenly. She requested a review with risk. "That's me." "Of course it is," he said. He stepped a little closer. Most men telegraphed intimidation with volume. He did it with volume control, lowering his voice until you had to lean in or admit you didn't care. "We're on the same team, you know," he murmured. "We all want the same thing." "And what's that?" I asked. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "For this to go away quietly," he said, "with as few people bleeding as possible." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what the external agency email implied. And they didn't even have the courtesy to sign it with a first name." His gaze flicked, just for a heartbeat, surprised. Then the amusement came back. "A woman who reads her email headers," he said. "No wonder he likes you." Who? I asked. He laughed, softly. Relax, Ms. Ortiz. I'm not here to take your job. Yet, Odetta tapped her cane twice. Hard. Young man, she said. If you're done circling the pond, some of us would like to get to the part where we see what's in the water. He glanced at her, then back at me. I'll walk you both down, he said. Make sure there are no misunderstandings. Every instinct screamed no. Every practical part of me knew that refusing would light up more alarms than accepting. Fine, I said, but you stay outside the vault room while we open the box. Policy. Of course, he said. You're the expert. We moved as a little procession. Me in front, Odetta at my side, Renzo just behind us. I could feel his eyes on my back. As we passed the teller line, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflective glass. To anyone watching, we probably looked like a banker, escorting a harmless retiree with a security guy in tow. To me, it felt like walking a fuse toward a stack of fireworks. We reached the vault door, heavy and circular, with its array of steel bolts and keypads. The vault attendant buzzed us through, after checking our IDs twice, eyes flicking nervously to Renzo's visitor badge. Policy says only authorized staff and box holders beyond this point, I reminded him, jerking my chin at the threshold. Renzo raised his hands in mock surrender. Scouts, honor, he said. I'll be right here. Listening for screams. That's supposed to be funny? I asked. That depends on how today goes, he replied. I stepped through with Odetta, the door swinging shut behind us with a hiss. The air inside was cooler, quieter, rows and rows of metal doors stretched out, each one holding some other family secrets. The attendant led us to 117A. My heart pounded as Odetta slipped the chain from her neck again, fingers steady. Last chance to run, she muttered. Too late, I said. I held my badge up to the reader, entered my code. The light turned from red to green. The attendant inserted the master key alongside hers, turned. The lock clicked. He slid the box out and set it on a little table in the private viewing cubicle, then stepped back. I'll give you privacy, he said. Just press the button when you're done. He left, pulling the sliding wall closed. It was just me, Odetta, and the box. Up close, the metal looked older, scratched. The label was worn. The ink faded. Go on, she said. You sure? I asked. That's what you're here for, she replied. I lifted the lid. Papers. So many papers. Ledger sheets. Photocopies of checks. Handwritten notes clipped together with rusted paper clips. An old envelope with my father's handwriting on it. My breath catching at the sight of my last name in his scribble. For a second, the room spun. My fingers hovered over the envelope. Take it, Odetta said softly. He meant it, to find you. I slid it out, hands shaking, on the front, in blue ink. If they're reading this, I'm either stubborn enough to be alive, or stupid enough to be dead. Either way, someone needs to know the truth. I swallowed hard. Viewers, this is the moment in the movie where people in the comments always say, I got chills. Real-life chills feel more like nausea and memory punching you in the throat. If you've ever found something from someone you thought you'd lost forever, a letter, a voicemail, a note shoved in an old book, tell me about it in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe, because we are about to find out exactly what my father thought was worth dying over. I slid the first few sheets out of the box. Names, amounts, signatures, the story of how ordinary people's futures got siphoned, one line at a time. I didn't notice the time pass. I barely heard the faint murmur of voices outside the cubicle. It wasn't until Odetta laid a hand on my arm that I looked up. "You're pale," she said. "We've been in here a while." "You need air," I nodded. Blinking, stinging eyes. "Let me just—" I started. A shadow fell across the gap under the sliding wall. Then a hand jerked it open. Renzo stood there, filling the doorway. That easy smile, nowhere to be seen now. "Done? Sightseeing?" he asked. "I told you," I began. Vault staff started getting nervous. He cut in. "External compliance called. Seems someone hit their threshold for too much activity on an old ghost account." His gaze dropped to the papers on the table. For a split second, something ugly flashed in his eyes. "Ah," he said softly. "So that's what he was afraid of." He looked at me. "You've been busy," he said. "Boss didn't say you were this curious." There it was, the same phrasing as the text. My stomach flipped. I realized, too late, that the wolf I should have been watching for wasn't the one pacing in a glass office. It was the one standing in front of me, smiling like he'd already decided which one of us he was, going to feed to the others. Renzo stepped into the cubicle like he owned the air. Up close. The charm was gone. His eyes were flat, his jaw tight, his hands empty but somehow more threatening than if he'd walked in waving a gun. "Back up," I said, automatically putting myself between him and the table. He looked at my hand on the papers and smiled, not the pretty one from the lobby. "Something thinner. Relax, Miss Ortiz," he said. "We're all friends here." "Friends, knock," Odetta muttered. He ignored her. His gaze flicked over the box, the envelope with my father's handwriting, the ledger sheets. "Old ghosts," he said quietly. "You really went digging?" "Bank policy says only box holders and authorized staff in here," I said. "You're neither. Get out." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. "Policy is cute," he said. "I'm here on behalf of the man whose name is plastered all over those shells. That makes me very authorized." "That's not how any of this works," I snapped. "Actually," he said mildly, "it's exactly how this works. Men like your boss and mine sign things. People like you and Ms. Harris hold the paper. People like me decide which paper survives when the wind picks up." Odetta's cane tapped once. "Sharp, boy," she said. "If you don't stop talking in poetry and say what you came to say, I'm calling it a day and a lawyer." Renzo's eyes flicked to her, and for a moment I saw it. The irritation, the calculation of how much trouble one old woman could really cause. "Here's the problem," he said, turning his attention back to me. "External compliance is sniffing around. They see that box accessed while you're in there with her. They're going to assume you're colluding. Bad word. Colluding. Gets people fired. Sometimes worse. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a weather report, he said. Storm's coming. I'm offering you an umbrella. By what? I demanded. Taking the papers. Burning them. Pretending we never opened this? He smiled again. Now, you're getting it. I laughed once. Harsh. You think I'm going to help you bury the evidence my father died for? His expression barely shifted, but something in his eyes cooled. Your father died because he didn't understand the game he was playing, he said softly. You do. Or you're about to. Don't pick up a flag you can't carry, Ortiz. I already picked it up, I said. We're in the vault. Then set it down, he replied. Walk out. Tell your boss the box was empty. The old lady is confused, and the trust can be settled quietly. I'll handle the rest. And by handle, you mean? I asked. He lifted one shoulder. There are shredders. There are fires. There's the river. We're creative. My stomach turned. Odetta's hand found mine, fingers squeezing hard. That's enough, she said. These papers are mine. Those notes are her father's. You touch them without my say-so. That's theft on top of theft. He studied her for a long moment. Ma'am, he said, voice going flat. There are men watching this building who don't know your name yet. You want to keep it that way. Let the grown-ups sort this out. I stepped in front of her fully, pulse hammering. You're not the grown-up in this scenario, I said. You're the cleanup crew. And I'm done letting cleanup crews decide who lives with the stain. For the first time since he walked in, his smile vanished completely. There it was. The wolf. He took a small step closer. You talk like that to him, too? He asked. Or just to the help? If by him, you mean Marcellus, I said. He doesn't hide behind other people's shadows. You do. His jaw ticked. You think he can protect you from the people I work for? Renzo asked, softly. You think this is just his little kingdom? There are bigger gods in this city, Ortiz. He's just a loud believer with better suits. Then, maybe it's time somebody kicked over the altar, I said. His eyes narrowed. For a second, I honestly thought he might grab the box and run. Instead, he did something worse. He took his phone out, snapped a photo of the open box with one quick motion, then another of my face. Congratulations, he said. You just became part of the record. You delete those. I snapped, lunging for the phone. He stepped back easily, pocketing it. Relax, he said. I'm not the only one who knows you've been busy. External already logged the access. I'm just documenting the fall. He nodded at the envelope in my hand. Enjoy your father's bedtime story, he said. Just remember, every line you read has a name attached. Some of those names are carved into office doors you walk past every day. Then he leaned in, close enough that I could feel his breath on my ear. And some of those names, he murmured, pay men like me to make problems disappear. Don't volunteer. He straightened, winked at Odetta like they were sharing a joke, and slid the cubicle wall fully open. I'll be right outside, he said, waiting to escort you back to daylight. He left, without looking back. The vault felt colder, after he was gone. For a moment, all I could hear was the rush of my own blood in my ears. "Baby," Odetta said quietly, "you got that look your father had. The one he wore right before he did something brave and stupid." "Which one do you think I'm about to do?" I asked. Voice shaky. "Probably both," she said. "So, let's at least make it count." She tapped the envelope. "Open it," she said. "Take pictures. Then we play nice and see how long their leash really is." We worked fast. I slid my father's letter out, scanning just enough to know it was as bad as I feared. Names, dates, a rough map of the scheme. Then I used my phone to snap photos of every page that looked important. Odetta held some of the sheets flat with trembling hands. "If they take the box," I said quietly, "we'll still have this." "That's the point," she said. "Your father wasn't stupid. He knew paper in one place is a target. That's why he sent copies. Now you do the same." By the time we slid the last page back into the box and closed the lid, my camera roll looked like a history book written in anger. I pressed the call button. The attendant came, face a little too carefully neutral. He took the box, locked it back in the wall, avoiding my eyes. Renzo was waiting by the vault door, hands in his pockets, the picture of relaxed restraint. "Everything satisfactory?" he asked. Voice bright. "Thrilling," I said. We walked back to the lobby together. Odetta peeled off toward the doors, promising to call me later. Renzo caught my elbow just long enough to make it clear he could, then let go. "Just remember," he said, soft enough only I could hear, "pictures on your phone are only as safe as you are, or as safe as the men who own the cloud." I smiled tightly. "Good thing I don't trust clouds," I said. He chuckled, then drifted away, blending into the lobby crowd like he'd never been there. That night, I was back in Marcellus's office. The sun had left streaks of red across the city. His lights were low, his tie loosened. He looked like he'd been awake longer than I had. "You brought copies?" he asked, eyes flicking to my bag. "Yes," I said. "And no, you're not getting them." His brows lifted. "You don't trust me," he said. "I don't trust anyone who benefits from those signatures," I replied. "You're on that list." He nodded slowly. "Fair," he said. "Then show me. At least," I hesitated, then pulled out my phone, flipping through the photos until I hit one with his company's logo in the corner and my father's handwritten note across the margin. "He thinks we're stupid. We're not. Watch this one." I turned the screen toward him. Something in his face crumpled for half a second when he saw my father's writing. "You recognize it?" I asked, quietly. "I remember him sliding that exact sheet across a table," he said, voice rough, "telling us he'd gone over the numbers twice, and they still didn't add up. And you ignored him," I said. "I was 24, he said. "I thought men with older suits knew better. I thought if there was a problem, they'd fix it, not cover it. I thought—" He trailed off, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter what I thought. I know what happened." He sank into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. "Renzo came to the vault today," I said. "Tried to get us to walk away. Took photos. Threatened grown-ups." Marcellus's jaw clenched. Of course, he did, he said. He's not my man anymore. Hasn't been for a while. He works for the ones I left. You didn't think to mention that. I demanded. I didn't know he'd already found you. He shot back. That text you showed me? I thought it was some bored regulator. Not him. He stood, pacing once. Then stopped in front of me. We're running out of room, he said. External sniffing. Renzo circling. You've got evidence that ties them to theft, and maybe worse. You're the hinge now, Leary. My heart stuttered at the way he said my name. What do you want from me? I whispered. His eyes softened in a way that made my chest hurt. First, he said, I want you to be safe, which means you don't walk anywhere alone for a while. Not to your car, not to your apartment, not to the bodega. And second? I asked. Second, he said, I want you to help me decide how to use what you have without getting you put in the ground, like your father. He stepped closer, the edge of his desk pressing into my back. His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek, then dropping to my shoulder instead. Warm, steady. You're angry at me, he said. You should be. I'm angry at younger me too. But right now, the men you're really at war with are the ones who think you're just another name they can write off on a loss sheet. His thumb brushed absently along my collarbone, where my blazer gaped, a small unplanned touch that sent a shiver through me. You have to stop doing that, I breathed. Doing what? He asked, touching me like I'm both a problem and something else, I said. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then snapped back up. You are something else, he said quietly, and if I hadn't ruined enough lives already, I'd drag you as far from this city as I could, and never let you near a bank again. I swallowed, hard. There's a compliment in there somewhere, I said. There's a confession, he replied. His hand slid up, fingers brushing the side of my neck, the back of his knuckles tracing my jaw. My breath hitched. Tell me to stop, he said. Mean it. And I will. I should have. Instead, I leaned in, just enough that our foreheads touched. The contact was gentle, almost tentative, but it felt like leaning against a wall I wasn't sure would be there in the morning. We're going to blow this open, I whispered. You and me, and that old lady with the cane. We're going to make them say our names in court and choke on every vowel. His chest rose against mine with a sharp breath. That's the most dangerous thing you've said yet, he murmured. Why? I asked. Because I believe you, he said. We stayed like that for a heartbeat too long, breath mingling, fingers tangled lightly at the nape of my neck, caught between wanting something simple and standing in the middle of something catastrophic. His phone shattered it. It buzzed on the desk, screen lighting up with a name that made the blood drain from his face. Renzo. He let go of me, grabbed the phone, answered on speaker before I could move. What? He said, voice ice. Renzo's voice slid through the room, smooth and amused. Boss, he said, just thought you should know. External, just filed for a warrant on the Riverside Trust. They're coming for your records and your favorite analyst. She's first on their interview list. I felt my stomach drop. Renzo chuckled. Hope you've got a good suit picked out for court, he added. Oh, and tell Ms. Ortiz to back up her photos. Accidents happen. The line clicked, dead. Marcellus and I stared at each other. The quiet in the room, louder than any shout. That was our new extreme. The system we'd both tried to bend was coming, and I was standing directly in its path. The room felt smaller after that call. Marcellus stared at his phone, like he could will the words back through the speaker. I stared at him, aware of every inch between us, and every inch we'd just erased. Say something, I managed. He did. Don't panic. Too late, I snapped. External has a warrant. They want my records. I'm first on their list. That's not a maybe we should worry. That's a do I have time to call a lawyer before they cuff me? He moved around the desk, fast but controlled, hands on my shoulders before I could pace a groove in his floor. Look at me, he said. I did. His eyes were dark, focused, the way they'd been when he was lining up numbers on the screen. Only now, the numbers were me. You flagged this trust, he said. You documented concerns. You were overruled. That's not conspiracy. That's due diligence. You're not their villain. Doesn't mean they won't try to make me one. I shot back. They love a rogue analyst story. Nice little scapegoat. They can parade in front of cameras. Then we don't let them write the story alone, he said. Who's we? I asked. Because your friend Renzo just made it clear. He doesn't see a difference between me and a piece of paper. He can shred. He's not my friend, he said sharply. Not anymore. I shook my head, stepping away, wrapping my arms around myself. Viewers, this is that moment when everything you've been sliding toward hits you at once. The legal risk, the men with money, the fact that you let yourself feel something for the worst possible person at the worst possible time. If you're still here, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if ever realized too late that your heart and your survival were pointed at the same man. We need a lawyer, I said. A real one. Someone who doesn't owe you favors. I have one who hates me enough to be honest, he said. We'll call him. But first, you tell Odetta what's happening. She deserves to know this isn't just about her retirement anymore. And my mother? I asked. You call her, he said. Tonight. Tell her to stay with a friend. Somewhere nobody would associate with you or the bank. He moved closer again, slower this time, like I was something breakable. You're not going to jail for what they did, he said quietly. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that, I said. Not with a phone call. Not with your money. His hand lifted, hesitant, then settled at the back of my neck, thumb brushing the tense line of muscle there. The touch was gentle, almost careful. I can promise. I will stand next to you in whatever room they drag you into, he said. Not behind, not above. Next to. And I can promise that if they want a head, mine is louder than yours. I laughed. Once. Shaky. Martyrdom looks weird on you, I said. Don't get used to it, he replied, a ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. I don't know if it was the fear, the closeness, or the way he said we like. It was the most natural word in the world. But something in me shifted. I reached up and caught his wrist, fingers curling around his pulse. "Marcellus," I said quietly. He searched my face, like there was an answer written there. He didn't trust himself to read. "Tell me to stop," he said again. I didn't. Instead, I closed the last inch. Our mouths met, not tentative this time, not an almost. Warm, real, tasting like coffee and tension and all the things we should have left alone. It wasn't soft. It was desperate. His hand slid into my hair, the other finding my waist and tugging me closer until my body hit his, until there was no space left to negotiate. My hands found his shoulders, the hard line of muscle under cotton, fingers digging in like I could anchor myself there. For a few seconds, the world shrank to breath and pressure, and the way my heart kicked against my ribs. He pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. "Terrible timing," he whispered. "The worst," I agreed, voice unsteady. "But I'm not sorry," he said. "Me neither," I admitted. We stayed there, pressed together, stealing one more moment of warmth in a room that felt like it was about to freeze over. Then he let go. Business slid back over his features like a mask. Only now, I knew what it hid. "I'll set up a meeting with my lawyer," he said. "You go home. Call your mother. Charge your phone. Tomorrow morning, we talk to Odetta. And then if External wants a show," he exhaled slowly, "we give them one," he finished. "With terms," I said. "With terms," he echoed. Outside, the night had teeth. I walked briskly to the subway, every shadow on the sidewalk suddenly suspect. I kept my phone in my hand, my keys gripped between my fingers. Paranoid. Maybe. Alive. Also maybe. At home, I triple-locked the door, dropped my bag, and went straight to the sink to splash water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked like she'd run a marathon in a storm. Eyes, too. Bright. Hair escaping its bun. Mouth still remembering the shape of him. I pushed that aside and called my mother. "Again," she said, when she saw my name flashing at nearly midnight. "You're going to make me think you miss me, or something?" "I do," I said, "but that's not why I'm calling." We talked. Logistics. I told her, without details, that there was risk at work, that some old cases were being reopened, that I wanted her to stay with a church friend for a few days. She didn't argue. "Text me the address," she said. "I'll pack a bag and go in the morning." "And, Leary?" "Yeah?" "Don't sign anything without reading every line 3 times, she said. "These people love to protect you onto a sinking ship." "I learned from the best," I said. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed with my father's envelope in my lap. I hadn't finished reading his letter at the vault. I did now. It wasn't just numbers. It was fear, written in ink. He talked about men whose smiles never reached their eyes, about signatures he knew he hadn't watched people write, about a younger man in expensive shoes who watched everything and said nothing. He warned that if anything happened to him, it wouldn't be a random mugging, that they'd call it that the paper would move on. He wrote one line that made my throat burn. "If my daughter ever sees this, tell her I'm sorry I didn't finish the fight. Maybe she'll be smarter than me and pick better armor. I pressed the page to my chest, eyes closed, breathing through the ache. "Hey, Dad," I whispered. "Guess what? Your math didn't die." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again, my stomach clenched. "You planning to come in quietly tomorrow, Miss Ortiz?" The text read, "External prefers cooperation. My people prefer theater." I stared at it for a long second. Then I did something I hadn't let myself do yet. I blocked the number. Immediately, another came through. Different digits. Same energy. "That's cute. See you soon." I didn't block that one. I powered the phone off instead. Viewers, I know some of you are yelling at your screens right now, telling me to run, to find a new city, a new name, a new life. Believe me, I thought about it. But if you've ever been so deep into something that turning around feels like drowning anyway, tell me in the comments. And if you're not already subscribed, do it now, because disappearing wasn't an option for me anymore. Not with what I knew, not with who I just kissed. Morning came too soon. I met Odetta at a diner a few blocks from the bank. Her choice: vinyl booths, bad coffee, waitresses who called you honorable like they'd known you for years. "You look like you swallowed a grenado," she said, as I slid into the booth. "Grenade," I corrected, automatically. "Spanish? English? Whatever." She waved. "You look like you swallowed it." I told her about the warrant, about external, about Renzo in the vault, about the photos, not about the kiss. Some things were mine for a minute, so they finally pretending to care, she said, stirring too much sugar into her coffee. Took them long enough. They could still mess this up, I said. Turn it into a PR show. Pin it on 1 or 2 dead men and a careless analyst and call it a day. Then we don't let them, she replied. Your father tried to fight them alone. You won't? I frowned. You keep saying that like you already have a plan. She smiled, small and sharp. I've been old a long time, she said. Gives you time to think. You and your Mafia man want quiet justice. There's nothing quiet about a public hearing with cameras. You want media, I realized. You want this in the court of public opinion. I want witnesses, she corrected. Men like that do fine, lying to judges. They don't do as well lying to folks who recognize the names on those checks. Media can be bought, I said. Some, she agreed. Not all. But even the bought ones like a scandal. Retired nurses robbed by charity fund plays well on TV. My stomach fluttered. So, we go public before they spin it, I said. We tell our story before they write it for us, she said. You, me, and your priest with the gun. He's not. I stopped. Forget it. She raised a brow. You in bed with him? Yet? She asked, bluntly. I choked on my coffee. Odetta. I'm old. Not dead, she said. And I see the way you talk about him. It's not... I started, then stopped. It's complicated. Everything worth doing is, she said. Just make sure if you're going to mix feelings with war, you know which one you're willing to lose. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number I recognized. Work. I answered. Ms. Ortiz, a neutral voice said. This is Agent Klein with the Joint Financial Crimes Task Force. We'd like you to come down for a voluntary interview this afternoon regarding the Riverside Workers Benefit Fund. There it was, the official knock. Voluntary, I repeated. For now, he said. I glanced at Odetta. She nodded once. Slow. Send me the address, I said into the phone. I'll be there. Appreciated, he replied. Oh, and Ms. Ortiz? Yeah? Please do not bring any original documents. Copies are fine. Originals should remain with the bank until we process the warrant. The line clicked. Odetta's eyes narrowed. He shouldn't know what you got, she said. Not like that. Renzo talks, I muttered. Everybody listens. We finished our coffee in silence. When we stepped outside, the sky was gray, low clouds pressing down like a lid. I walked her to her bus stop, hugging her tighter than I meant to. Be careful, I said. You too, she replied. Remember, the loudest person in the room ain't always the one in charge. Watch the quiet ones. I watched her climb onto the bus, cane clicking, shoulders squared. Then I headed home to change for the interview. I picked a simple blouse, dark slacks, flat shoes. No jewelry, except my watch. Hair pulled back. Makeup minimal. Not weak. Not flashy, just credible. My phone chimed with the address. Downtown. Federal Building. I grabbed my bag, checked that my phone was fully charged, slipped my father's letter into a folder with copies of the other key pages. At the door, I paused. The deadbolt and chain looked suddenly thin. I double-checked my mother's text confirming she'd gotten to her friend's place. Good. One less thing to worry about. I opened the door and froze. The hallway outside my apartment wasn't empty. 2 men in suits stood there, badges at their waists, neutral expressions plastered on. Between them, leaning against the wall like he owned it, was Renzo. He smiled when he saw me. Change of plans, Miss Ortiz, he said. Task force. Decided they'd rather do this the old-fashioned way. One of the agents lifted a hand. Liriel Ortiz? He asked. Yes, I said slowly. You're under arrest for suspicion of financial conspiracy and obstruction, he said calmly. You have the right to remain silent. The words blurred as the hallway tilted. My bag slipped from my fingers. Renzo's smile widened. And just like that, viewers, the system I thought I could use grabbed me by the wrists instead and snapped the cuffs on before I could even decide which side of the war I was standing on. They didn't drag me out in handcuffs. They walked me out. That was worse. No yelling. No slammed heads. No neighbors peeking through doors. Just 2 agents with firm hands and rehearsed politeness, escorting me down the stairs like I was being taken to a meeting instead of my own personal trial. Is this really necessary? I asked, as the cuffs bit cold into my wrists. Standard procedure. the taller one said. His badge said Klein. You're not charged yet. Just detained for questioning. Oh, good, I said. So we're only halfway to ruined. Renzo followed at a lazy distance, hands in his pockets, like this was a show he'd already seen, and still liked. You might want to breathe, Miss Ortiz, he said lightly. You'll need your voice calm. Shut up, I snapped. Agent Klein gave him a sharp look. You're done here, Renzo. We'll take it from here. Just making sure our helpful analyst doesn't trip, he said. Boss would hate for her to get hurt before she testifies. I wanted to lunge at him. The cuffs helped. Viewers. This is the part where people in the comments love to say, I would have kicked. I would have screamed. I would have spat in his face. But sometimes survival looks like shutting your mouth and memorizing the faces of everyone who wants you quiet. If you're still with me, hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments what you'd do if the system showed up at your door wearing a polite smile. The ride downtown was quiet. Agent Klein, read me my rights again. His partner, Wallace, typed notes on a tablet. Outside the window, the city blurred. Bodegas, laundromats, the park where kids played after school. All the normal things people did when they weren't being walked through the script of a crime show. Do you understand your rights, Miss Ortiz? Klein asked. I understand that anything I say can be twisted into a headline, I said. Is that the same thing? He didn't flinch. You can ask for an attorney at any time, he said. You said on the phone you'd come in voluntarily. Did anyone threaten you to change your mind? I thought of Renzo's texts, the photo from the hallway, the look on his face. Yes, I said, but not from your side. Meaning, Wallace asked. Meaning the bank's security consultant has a funny way of talking about accidents, I said. You want the truth? Start by subpoenaing his phone instead of mine. They exchanged a look that told me they already knew his name. Of course they did. The interview room was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, bolted table, camera in the corner. They uncuffed me once I sat, which somehow made me feel more vulnerable, not less. Water? Klein asked. I'd like a lawyer, I said. Already on his way. A new voice said from the doorway. I turned. Marcellus stood there in a tailored overcoat, no tie, jaw locked. Beside him was another man, older, lean, with iron gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen a lot of bad decisions and billed for most of them. Federal public defenders are on the floor below, Klein said. Cool. We didn't realize you were bringing private counsel, Mr. DeRossi. That's because you didn't ask, the older man said. I'm Calder. She's my client now. We'll need a minute alone. Mr. DeRossi isn't, Wallace began. Isn't staying, Calder cut in. He can wait outside with the other concerned parties. For a second, Marcellus looked like he might ignore that. His gaze slid to me, searching. Are you okay? He asked. The question was so simple, it almost broke me. No, I said. But I'm here. A corner of his mouth twitched, like he wanted to say more. Calder put a hand on his arm. Out, he murmured. Marcellus gave me one last look, turned, and left, shoulders tight. When the door clicked shut, Calder took the chair across from me, set a folder on the table, and looked me over the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray. "All right, Miss Ortiz," he said, "from this moment on, you do not improvise. You do not clarify. You answer what's asked, not what you think they meant." "Understood. I've never been arrested before, if that helps," I said. "It doesn't," he replied. "But your file does." "My file?" I repeated. He tapped the folder. "Your internal notes, your escalation emails, your original flag on Riverside. They've been watching you longer than you think." I swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" He studied me for a beat. "You're in the middle," he said. "They like putting people in the middle. Easier to squeeze both sides." "Who's they?" I asked. "Today," he said, "the task force. Tomorrow, depends who leaks first." He leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what you have," he said. "Copies, photos, letters. Don't lie." "I can't protect what I don't know." I hesitated, then nodded. "I have pictures of ledger pages," I said, "from Odetta's box. My father's letter. Notes he made about signatures. Overlays from bank statements and the funds records. It's a lot." "On your phone?" he asked. "For now," I said. "Backed up?" He pressed. "Not to anything with my name on it," I said. "I'm not stupid." He actually smiled. Faintly. "Good," he said. "That gives us leverage." "Leverage?" I repeated. "You're a whistle they can't afford to blow too hard," he said. "They need you cooperative. They need you credible. They can't make you the mastermind. There are too many men with bigger offices in those papers, so they'll try to paint you as naive, overzealous, useful." "That makes me feel so much better," I muttered. "Don't worry about feelings," he said. "Worry about facts. Fact, you wrote concerns down before any of this blew up. Fact, you were overruled. Fact, you're the one who forced them to pay attention now. That can be shield or sword, depending on how we use it." He sat back. "When they come in," he said, "you stick to that. You were doing your job. You followed procedure. You reached out to legacy beneficiaries when you realized there might be harm. You did not destroy or alter any documents. You did not benefit from the theft. You are here because you refused to ignore a red flag." "That sounds clean," I said. "Doesn't have to be clean," he replied. "Just true enough. They can't knock it over." The door opened. Klein and Wallace came back in, more formal now. "Miss Ortiz," Klein said, "thank you for your patience. As we said, this is a voluntary interview at this stage. You are free to leave at any time, though we'd strongly advise against it, as it could be seen as uncooperative." Calder gave him a bland smile. "We'll stay," he said. "For now." They turned on the recorder. They walked me through my career. Collections, risk, the promotion to strategic clients. They asked about my first impression of the Riverside Urban Development Foundation. They asked how I knew Marcellus. "Professionally," I said. "He's a client." "And personally?" Wallace asked. I felt Calder's shoe nudge mine, under the table. Also, professionally, I said. Any contact outside work has been about work. Technically, not a lie, if you squinted hard enough. What made you flag Riverside? Klein asked. The pattern, I said. Money in from entities that didn't match the stated mission profile. Money out to organizations that didn't exist beyond paper. Historical discrepancies in the original trust language. You understood there were powerful clients involved, he said. I understood the numbers didn't add up, I replied. That's my job. They moved to the box. How did you learn about Ms. Harris? Wallace asked. Her box triggered a conflict alert, I said. Linked trust. Similar naming. System flagged it. I went down to see why. Did anyone instruct you to meet with her? Klein pressed. No, I said. I chose to. Why? He asked. Because my father died with that fund in his briefcase, I said. The room went still. Explain, Klein said quietly. So, I did. I told them about the committee, about the envelopes, about the robbery, about the notes in my father's handwriting. I didn't cry. I let my voice wobble once, then straightened it. Not acting, just editing. You understand how that looks, Wallace said gently. You have a personal stake. Yes, I said. I also have a professional obligation not to let theft stand, just because it's old. Klein glanced at Calder. Did Mr. de Rossi ask you to suppress any of this? He asked, turning back to me. The truthful answer was complicated. He asked me to buy time, I said, so he could understand the scope before bigger sharks smelled blood. He did not ask me to destroy anything. He did not offer me money. He did show me a picture of my mother outside her clinic, and imply bad things could happen if this went wrong. Calder closed his eyes briefly. Jesus, he muttered. Klein's brows shot up. He threatened your family? He described the risk, I said. In his world. Those are the same thing. Did you report that? Wallace asked. To who? I countered. The same bank that promoted me to manage his accounts. The same regulators who ignored my father. Silence. Klein turned off the recorder. We're going to take a short break, he said. Don't leave the room. They stepped out. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. How bad is it? I asked Calder. Bad, he said, but not worst case. They're not sure which way to swing yet. I thought you said I wasn't the villain, I said. You're not, he replied. You're the narrator. They just haven't decided if they want to hear your whole story or cut it for time. Viewers, I thought. This is what quiet justice really looks like up close. Not a big triumphant speech in a courtroom, but a handful of men in small gray rooms deciding which truths are convenient. If this makes you as angry as it made me sitting in that chair, drop a justice in the comments. And don't forget to share this story. Somebody needs to hear it. The door opened again. This time, only Klein came back. We're done for now, he said. We're releasing you on your own recognizance. No charges today. You'll surrender your passport and be available for further questioning. That's it? I blurted. You haul me out in cuffs, grill me, and then just let me walk? For now, he repeated. Don't mistake this for mercy, Ms. Ortiz. It's logistics. Calder stood. We'll see ourselves out, he said. My client has a life to return to, however temporarily. In the hallway, we found Marcellus waiting, hands in his pockets, back against the wall. He straightened when he saw me, eyes scanning my face for damage. No bruises, I said. Just a new appreciation for fluorescent lighting. He exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Let's get you out of here, he said. Calder checked his watch. You two talk, he said. I'm going to go charm a clerk into letting me see the affidavit on that warrant. Call me if anyone so much as coughs in your direction. He walked off, leaving us alone in the corridor. For a moment, we just stood there, the hum of government air conditioning buzzing overhead. How bad? He asked. Bad, I said, but not fatal. Yet, they know about my father, about the box, about you. They don't trust anybody. Smart of them, he said. You still think you can control this? I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. I think I can choose which direction it explodes, he said. That's about it. We stepped out into the cold afternoon. The sky had cleared. Sunlight bounced off the courthouse steps, off windshields, off the lenses of cameras. Cameras. 3 news crews were camped across the street. Microphones, tripods, hungry eyes. They move fast, I muttered. They smell blood, he said. One of the reporters spotted us. Ms. Ortiz, she called, hurrying across the crosswalk with her cameraman. Do you have a comment on your role in the Riverside Fund investigation? My heart jumped into my throat. Marcellus shifted subtly, placing himself half a step between me and the lens. Calder's voice echoed in my head. Don't improvise. I lifted my chin. I did my job, I said, keeping my voice steady. I flagged a problem. I refused to pretend it wasn't there. That's all I'll say for now. And Mr. De Rossi? She pressed, angling the mic toward him. Did your foundation divert funds from pensioners to pay for developments tied to your companies? He smiled, the public one, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Every dollar that passed through my foundation will be accounted for, he said, in full view. I'm not hiding. Sources say organized crime is tied to these accounts, she pushed. Do you deny that? His jaw tightened. I deny that anyone but thieves took money from nurses and janitors, he said. If you want to talk about organized crime, start with whichever executives signed off on that. Her eyebrows shot up. Are you saying you'll testify against other players in this scheme? She asked. He paused. For a heartbeat. Our eyes met. This was a line. Once he crossed it, there was no walking it back. I'm saying, he replied slowly, that some old debts are coming due, and some men who thought they'd never have to answer for them are about to hear their names out loud. The words hung in the air like a thrown match. Behind the reporter, I saw a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost. Renzo. Sunglasses on now. Smile. Gone. He lifted his phone, pointed it at us like a weapon, and pressed record. Then he mouthed a single word. Boom. Viewers. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about ledgers or warrants anymore. The war had shifted to daylight, and we'd just lit the fuse on live TV. The clip hit the internet before I even made it home. By the time I slammed my apartment door behind me and kicked off my shoes, my phone was already vibrating nonstop. Group chats I hadn't opened in months. Unknown numbers. News? Notifications. I sank onto the couch, thumb hovering over the screen. The video was 30 seconds. The reporter's question. My one line. I did my job. I flagged a problem. Then Marcellus, standing half a step in front of me, saying, "Some old debts are coming due," with that edge to his voice that made you believe someone, somewhere, was already sweating. It cut off, right before Renzo mouthed, "Boom. Smart editing. For now." Comments flooded under it. "Yo. This is wild. My aunt's pension went through Riverside. I swear she's lying. They're all in on it. Protect that analyst." Viewers, if you've ever watched your own life turn into content, you know this feeling. That weird split where part of you wants to scroll and part of you wants to smash the phone. If you're still here with me, hit like and drop. I'm watching in the comments because things were about to move faster than any algorithm could keep up with. My phone buzzed again. "Odetta," I answered on the first ring. "You saw it? Whole church saw it," she said. Pastor paused Bible study to replay it. "You got aunties in 3 boroughs ready to testify with their statements in hand. That's good," I said, thrown. "It is, if you live long enough to join them," she said. "Where are you?" "Home," I said, "for as long as they let me keep a door." "Pack a bag," she said. "Your hallway already had too many strangers in it. You don't stay where they know your locks." "I'm not running," I said. "You're relocating," she corrected. "Temporarily. Get your toothbrush. Bring your laptop. Leave anything you don't want to see on a warrant list." "Where am I going?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your boyfriend, with the blood money, offered safe houses," she finally said. "Take one. Doesn't mean you owe him your soul." "He's not," I started, then stopped. "He did say he didn't want me walking anywhere alone." "Good," she said. "Make him prove it. And tell him from me, if he lets anything happen to you before we finish this, I'm haunting him." It felt wrong to pack, like I was conceding something. I threw clothes into a small duffel anyway. Laptop. Folder with printed copies of key pages. My father's letter folded into my wallet. I hesitated over family photos on the shelf. If they raided this place, they'd see all of it anyway. I left them at the door. I paused, hand on the knob, looking back at the small life I'd built. Thrift store couch. The chipped mug on the coffee table. The plant I kept half alive. "I'll be back," I told it, which was insane. But talking to a plant was currently less crazy than half the emails in my inbox. The hallway was empty. Good. I headed down the stairs and out onto the street, squinting against the late afternoon glare. His car was already double parked by the hydrant. Black, low, the kind that didn't belong on my block. A few kids on scooters circled it, trying to act casual while they peeked in. Marcellus leaned against the hood, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie gone. He looked like he'd walked off a magazine spread titled, "Regret, but make it attractive." One of the kids said something. He laughed, handed over a bill, then looked up and saw me. The shift in his face. Relief, anger, something softer, hit me like a gust of wind. "You took your time," he said, as I approached. "I had to decide whether to trust you," I said. "Where'd you land?" he asked. "On trust him. But keep a backup," I said. He nodded once. Like that was the only sane answer. He opened the passenger door. "Get in," he said. "We're not talking about felonies on the sidewalk." His place wasn't a penthouse. He'd corrected me once, too sharp, when I joked about it, but it was close. Top floor of a renovated industrial building, brick walls, big windows, too much open space for one person. I stepped inside and felt out of place immediately. Everything was curated. Clean lines, dark wood, soft rugs that looked like they cost more than my student loans. He watched me take it in. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "That you don't own a single cheap chair?" I said, a ghost of a smile. "That you shouldn't trust any man whose kitchen looks this unused?" I glanced at the stainless steel expanse. "You order in a lot?" "Used to," he said. "Now I eat at the club more." Easier to do business when someone else clears the plates. "The club," I echoed. "Right. Where all the legitimate philanthropists meet." He let that slide. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward the couch. "You look like your bones are vibrating." I sat. He dropped onto the cushion beside me, closer than he had to, but not close enough to touch. The tension in the room was its own piece of furniture. "Agent Klein didn't charge you," he said. "That's good for now," I echoed. We sat in silence for a minute. The city hummed outside. "You kissed me," I blurted. It wasn't what I meant to say. It was what was stuck in my throat. His mouth twitched. "You kissed me back," he said. "And then they arrested me," I said. "I'm trying to decide if that's a sign of my terrible timing," he said. "Not of that." He hesitated, then turned to face me fully. One leg bent on the couch cushion. "I'm not going to pretend this is normal," he said. "My world. Yours. This, whatever we're doing in the middle of all of it. But I'm also not going to lie and say I don't want it." My pulse picked up. "Want what?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I liked. He reached up, fingers brushing a curl that had escaped my bun, tucking it gently behind my ear. "You," he said. The words sat between us, heavy and simple. "This is insane," I whispered. "Completely," he agreed. "And if this goes sideways," I said, "I could end up losing my job, my license, my freedom. Just for knowing you." You could lose those anyway, he said quietly. Not because of me, but because of what other men did that you had the bad luck to notice. That doesn't make me feel better, I said. It's not supposed to, he replied. It's supposed to make you honest. He shifted closer, slow enough that I could have moved away. I didn't. His hand settled lightly on my knee, fingers warm through the thin fabric of my pants. I don't know what this looks like in 6 months, he said. Maybe we're both testifying. Maybe we're both rebuilding from ashes. But right now, in this room, there's one thing I know I can do. What? I asked. Even though my body already knew. He slid his hand up, slow, to my hip, then my waist, pulling me gently toward him. Our mouths met again, but this time there was no courtroom hanging over us, no knock on the door. Just us, and the hum of the city, and the knowledge that tomorrow could be worse. I sank into it. His lips were firm, searching. Not tentative now, but careful in a different way. Like he was learning a language and didn't want to mispronounce anything. My fingers found the buttons of his shirt, not to undo them, but to grab onto something. I felt the heat of him through the cotton, the steady thump of his pulse under my palm. He drew me closer, until I was half in his lap, one arm wrapped around my lower back, hand splayed broad and warm. My heart stuttered, then raced to catch up. When his tongue brushed my lower lip, I answered without thinking, opening for him, letting the kiss deepen. It wasn't rough. It wasn't gentle. It was full. All the things we hadn't said, pressed into the spaces where our mouths met. My hand slid up, fingers threading into the hair at the back of his head. He made a low sound in his throat that went straight through me. We broke apart only when breathing became non-negotiable. He rested his forehead against mine, chest rising and falling against my ribcage. Every instinct I have says this is a bad idea, I said, breathless. Every instinct I have is corrupted, he said. I'm trying to listen to the ones that started before the money. I laughed, sharp, but softer than before. If you're watching this thinking, they're making terrible choices, you're not wrong. But sometimes people in stories don't get to pause and detox before they feel things. Sometimes the heart picks the worst possible moment. If you get that, tap the like button and tell me if you've ever loved somebody right in the middle of your own mess. He kissed my cheek, then my jaw, then the spot just below my ear that made my breath hitch. We have to stop, I said, though my hands were still gripping his shoulders. I know, he murmured against my skin. He eased me back a little, thumb brushing my lower lip one last time like he was memorizing it. Food, he said. We should eat. Talk. Before I forget what the point of this meeting was, pretty sure the point shifted, I said. He smiled. For real this time. For what it's worth, he said, standing. If everything blows up tomorrow, I'm glad this happened first. I watched him move into the kitchen, grab takeout menus, like a man trying to pretend his hands hadn't just been on my waist. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach dropped. I almost didn't answer. Hello, I said, backing away from the couch. There was a crackle. Then Odetta's voice, thin and wrong. Baby, she said, don't panic. My heart slammed against my ribs. What happened? I'm fine, she said quickly. Mostly fine. They missed. Missed what? I demanded. Where are you? Hospital, she said. Just a few stitches. Firebombs don't aim like they used to. The room tilted. What? I said. Someone threw something through my window, she said. Little bottle. Big flame. Neighbor saw the car peel off. I was in the kitchen. Heard the glass. Grabbed the extinguisher. Cursed till the angels covered their ears. 911 came. Now, I got a handsome young doctor telling me I'm remarkably resilient for my age. Her voice shook under the humor. Why didn't you call me sooner? I whispered. You were busy getting arrested on TV, she said. Didn't want to interrupt your debut. Tears pricked my eyes. Do the cops know who did it? I asked. They're calling it possible arson. Like that makes it smaller, she said. But my neighbor said the car was dark, fancy, wrong for the block. I closed my eyes. Renzo's car rolled through my mind like a threat. Which hospital? I asked. She told me. I'm coming, I said. Don't argue. You bring him, she said. If they're going to try to scare us quiet, I want the man who woke the hornet's nest to see the stings. I hung up, hands shaking. Marcellus was watching me from the kitchen doorway, menus forgotten in his hands. What? He asked. What happened? They went after her, I said. Somebody firebombed Odetta's apartment. His face went blank for a second. Then it hardened into something cold. Is she alive? He asked. Yes, I said. Stitches. Smoke. She's at the hospital. He grabbed his keys off the counter. We're going, he said. Marcellus, I started. He stepped in close, eyes burning. They put hands on a woman who has nothing but a pension and a key, he said, voice low. This isn't a warning shot anymore. It's a line. He took my hand, fingers threading through mine, grip firm. You still want quiet justice? He asked. Because after tonight, we might not get to whisper. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. A photo. Odetta's building. Smoke curling out of a shattered window. Yellow tape. The caption. You wanted witnesses. We're doing crowd control. My chest tightened. Viewers, if you thought this was just going to be spreadsheets and courtrooms, think again. Somebody had decided fear was their favorite tool, and they'd just tried to burn our proof alive. The hospital waiting room smelled like bleach and old fear. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. TVs on the wall played muted news with scrolling captions about corruption and pensions. Nobody looked at them. We walked in hand, without thinking. Only when a nurse glanced down at our fingers did I realize. I started to pull away. He tightened his grip, just for a second, like he was saying, Not now. Not this. Ms. Harris? I asked, at the desk. My voice came out too loud. Odetta Harris? Brought in from a fire? The nurse checked her screen. Family? She asked. Yes, Marcellus said. Before I could speak, we're her people. She looked at him, then at me. taking in the expensive coat and my rumpled blouse. Something in her face softened. "Room 314, she said. "She's stable. Smoke inhalation. Minor burns. She's tough." "Yeah," I breathed. "She is." We took the elevator up. I watched our reflection in the mirrored doors. Him, in his perfect clothes, jaw tight. Me with hospital wristbands and court stamps still visible in the faint indent of my skin. We didn't look like a hero and a villain. We looked like two tired people who'd run out of ways to pretend we weren't in this together. Odetta was propped up on the bed, oxygen tube under her nose, arm in a sling, hair wrapped in a scarf that said she'd argued with somebody about being presentable. "About time," she said when she saw us. I was starting to think the fire was less dangerous than daytime TV. I exhaled a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You're okay," I said, crossing the room. "I'm scorched," she corrected. "Not cooked." "Come here." I leaned in carefully, hugging her around wires and bandages. She smelled like antiseptic and burned fabric. "Whoever did this has bad aim," she whispered in my ear. "We're going to use that." Marcellus stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, staring at the bruise blooming along her cheekbone. "Who knew where you lived?" he asked, quietly. "Half the neighborhood," she said. "You think I keep my address a secret? I've been cashing the same Social Security checks there for 20 years. This wasn't random." His jaw flexed. "Did you see the car?" I asked. "Dark," she said. "Too shiny for my block. My neighbor says he got the plate, gave it to the cops. They wrote it down like it hurt their hands. Plate starts with 3 letters. Marcellus asked. "Alexen?" Her eyes narrowed. "You know something I don't?" He looked at me. "That's one of the plates Renzo uses," he said. A chill went through me. Viewers, this is when the villain stops being a shadow and starts having angles, license plates, habits, patterns. If you've ever watched a problem go from vague threat to "I know exactly who did this," drop a comment, because that shift hurts and helps at the same time. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. This is where the quiet justice stops being polite. The door opened. A detective stepped in. Mid-40s, rumpled suit, tie loosened, notepad in hand. He had the look of a man who'd seen too many bad nights and knew this was another one. "Miss Harris," he said. "Detective Anders. Sorry to bother you again. We just need to clarify a few details." Odetta rolled her eyes. "I already told you. Glass, flame, bad aim. What else you want? Their blood type." His gaze flicked to me. "You're Miss Ortiz," he said. "Saw you on the news." "Lucky me," I said. Then his eyes slid to Marcellus. "And you're the man whose name is popping up in every brief on my desk," he said. "Mr. De Rossi." "Detective," Marcellus said, polite but not warm. Anders looked between us, put the pieces together, and sighed. "Here's the thing," he said. "My job is supposed to be simple. Somebody throws fire at a 90-year-old woman's window, I find the somebody. But this," he gestured at the TV in the corner, where a news ticker still scrolled about the Riverside scandal. This turned our arson report into a political football before the flames were out. Meaning? I asked. Meaning half the supervisors in this building already got calls telling them to treat this as unrelated to your fund mess, he said. And the other half are telling me not to rule anything out. I can't walk straight without stepping on toes. Did your neighbor give you the plate? Marcellus asked again. Voice edged. Anders looked at him. We got a partial, he said. 3 letters. LXN. Your people use a lot of cars, don't they? My people? Marcellus repeated. You didn't get that rich on a W-2. Anders said. I'm not stupid. I just pick my battles. Pick this one. I cut in. Please. This isn't just about her. It's about what she has. They're trying to burn evidence and scare witnesses at the same time. You got proof it's connected? He asked. I have proof the same names show up on her statements. And the fund records, I said. And the same security consultant who's been circling our case just happened to have access to bank surveillance footage and a taste for intimidation. Renzo, he said, flat. You know him, I said. Everybody who walks certain streets in this city knows him, Anders replied. He's the guy who shows up when fires need to look like accidents, and accidents need to look like fires, then bring him in, I said. He gave me a look. You're smart enough to know it's not that simple, he said. Men like him don't touch matches. They just tell other people where the gas station is. So, what do you do? I asked. Document. He said, build. Wait for them to get sloppy. Sloppy? I repeated, glancing at Odetta's bandaged arm. He threw a bottle through a 90-year-old woman's window. How much sloppier you need? He sighed. As sloppy as confessing on tape, he said. Or putting his name on something he can't explain. Until then, I can't even get a warrant. Not with the calls I've already gotten. What calls? Marcellus asked, sharply. People with nicer suits than you, Anders said, asking why I'm harassing a respected contractor tied to your community projects. They don't say his name. They don't have to. He turned back to Odetta. Ma'am, he said, you sure you don't want to stay with family out of town for a few days? I've got family right here, she said, jerking her chin at me. And I'm not running from cowards who can't even throw straight. Anders studied her, then nodded slowly. I'm assigning a patrol car to your block for the next few nights, he said. It's cosmetic, but cosmetics calm neighbors. And if you remember anything else about that car, you call me. Direct, he put a card on the bedside table. Then he looked at me again. You keep doing what you're doing, he said. Just remember, institutions protect themselves first. Don't expect too much from this place. He gestured at the walls, or your bank, or your task force friends. I don't, I said. Good, he replied. Keeps disappointment down. When he left, the room felt heavier. Odetta watched him go, then looked at us. Well, she said, they're scared. Scared enough to throw fire, I said. That's not comforting. It means they believe those papers in that box are dangerous, she said. And that you are. They don't try to burn people who don't matter. That's a messed up pep talk, I muttered. She reached out with her good hand and grabbed my wrist. Listen to me, she said. You can still walk away. You can say you tried. You can let the system chew this up on its own. But if you stay, you go all the way. No half steps. No hoping somebody else does the hard thing. My eyes stung. You sound like my father, I said. Good, she replied. Maybe this time we get a different ending. She looked at Marcellus. And you, she said, you want to be on the right side of this? You stop hiding behind pretty words and lawyers. You use those cameras you hate to protect her instead of yourself. He held her gaze. I went on record, he said. They'll come for me now, too. They were always coming, she said. You just finally turned around to face them. He nodded. Once, I'll tighten security around you, he said. Drivers who don't answer to Renzo. New phones. Safe places to sleep. Start with her, Odetta said. Then worry about your own neck. He looked at me, eyes softening. That's the plan, he said. We left, when the nurse hinted visiting hours were a suggestion, not an invitation. In the hallway, away from Odetta's brave face and bandages, my legs finally started to shake. I leaned against the cool wall, closing my eyes, breathing like I'd been taught in yoga videos I never finished. He stepped in front of me, not touching, just there. You okay? He asked. No, I said, but I'm upright. That's a start, he said. I opened my eyes. He was so close, I could see the faint line at the corner of his mouth, the tension in his jaw, the worry he was trying to hide. Without thinking, I reached for him. My hands slid up his chest, bunching in his shirt. He exhaled, low and rough, and stepped closer, bracing a hand on the wall by my head, the other settling at my hip. I started, then stopped, not sure what word came next. Tell me, he said. I need something that's not this, I whispered. Not warrants, not fires. Just something that proves I'm still human and not a case file. His eyes darkened, but not in the way that scared me. Come here, he murmured. He bent his head and kissed me. There, in the quiet hospital corridor with nurses walking past and monitors beeping through closed doors, he kissed me like the world wasn't trying to break us in half. It was slower than before. No rush, no smashing together, because we thought it might be the last time. His lips moved against mine with a patience that made my chest ache. His thumb traced slow circles at my waist, grounding me. I sank into him, pressing my body along his, feeling the solid line of him from knees to chest. The fluorescent lights above us hummed, but everything sharp in my head went soft for a moment. He broke away, just long enough to press his forehead to mine. You're not a file, he said quietly. You're the only real thing in a room full of lies. That's a terrible line, I breathed. I'm not trying to impress you, he replied. I'm trying to keep you from shaking. I realized then that my hands, still gripping his shirt, were trembling. He covered them with his own, threading our fingers together, flattening our joined hands against his chest, where his heart hammered. Feel that? He asked. Yeah, I whispered. That's every reason I have to make sure you walk out of this, he said. Don't say things like that, I said. You're making it harder to be mad at you. Good, he replied softly. I'd rather you be alive and angry than anything else. Someone cleared their throat behind us. We snapped apart. A nurse pushing a cart gave us a look that was half annoyance, half understanding. You two can play soap opera somewhere that isn't a fire hazard, she said. People trying to heal here. Sorry, I muttered, cheeks burning. She rolled her eyes and kept moving. Marcellus gave me a crooked smile. Come on, he said. Let's get out of fluorescent lighting before we both confess things we shouldn't. Back at his place, the city lights spilled in through the windows like a second ceiling. He locked the door, double-checked it, then set his keys in a dish by the console. The domestic motion felt weirdly intimate. Sit, he said. I'll make coffee. You don't make things, I said automatically. You order them. He shrugged out of his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and moved into the kitchen. You'll be surprised what I can learn under duress, he said. I watched him move, opening cabinets, finding filters, filling the kettle. He looked less like a legend and more like a man. It scared me more. I sat on the stool at the island, elbows on the cool stone. Viewers, if you've ever seen someone go from headline to person right in front of you, you know how dangerous that is. It's easier to hate a story than a breathing, flawed human who makes you coffee after the hospital. If that makes sense, hit like and drop human in the comments. We're not built for black and white. He set a mug in front of me a few minutes later. It tasted awful. I drank it anyway. You really don't cook, I coughed. He winced. I can buy better beans. You can buy better everything, I said. Doesn't mean you know what to do with it. He leaned on the other side of the island, watching me. What do we do now? I asked. We wait, he said. Calder will call when he's seen the warrant paperwork. Anders will keep poking at the fire. External will decide which way to lean based on public noise and internal politics. That's a lot of waiting for someone who just had their window set on fire, I said. He nodded. So, we don't sit still while we wait, he said. We prepare. We move money into a restitution fund. Quietly, we line up community figures who'll speak for Odetta and the other retirees. We make sure if any part of this goes to trial, it's not just you and her standing there against a wall of suits. You keep saying, we, I said. Until you tell me to stop, he replied. I set the mug down, staring at the dark liquid. I don't know if I can trust you, I said. Honest? I know, he said. But I believe you're more scared of what those other men will do than what a judge will, I added. Also true, he said. And I think, I sighed. I think you're trying. In your messed up, criminal-adjacent way, he almost smiled. That's the nicest thing anyone said about me, he said. It's not, I said, but it's the most accurate. We looked at each other across the island. The air between us thickened again, but this time it wasn't just fear. I walked around the counter, slowly. He straightened, tracking my movements. What are you doing? He asked. Making another bad decision, I said. I stepped in between him and the counter, close enough that his knees brushed mine. His hands came up, hovering like he wanted to touch my waist, but was waiting for permission. I gave it. I took his wrists, placed his hands on my hips, then slid my arms up around his neck. "This," I said softly, "is the last time we do this before something blows up. I can feel it. So if we're going to be idiots, let's at least be honest about it." His eyes darkened. "Honest? How?" he asked. "Don't hold back," I said. "Not with this. Not tonight." Something in his face crumpled and smoothed at the same time. He cupped my face in both hands, thumbs brushing my cheekbones, and kissed me like he'd been holding his breath all day. This wasn't a careful kiss in a hospital hallway or a stolen moment in an office. It was deeper, hungrier, threaded with fear and relief, and something dangerously close to hope. His mouth moved against mine with a slow insistence that made my knees wobble. His hands slid from my face down my neck, over my shoulders, pulling me closer until I was pressed fully against him. I could feel the heat of his body, the solid strength of him, the way his chest rose and fell against mine. We stumbled back until my hips hit the counter. He lifted me easily, setting me on the edge, stepping between my knees. The motion stole my breath. His hands were sure, warm, steady. I buried my fingers in his hair, angling his head to deepen the kiss. He answered, with a low sound that vibrated through both of us. His lips left mine, only to trail along my jaw, down the hollow of my throat, lingering just long enough to make my head fall back. His breath was warm on my skin. His hands never stopped moving. Up my back, along my sides, learning the shape of me, like it mattered. I pulled him closer, feeling the hard lines of his shoulders under my palms. The tension coiled in him like a spring. For a few minutes, there was no bank, no fund, no firebomb, just skin and breath, and the knowledge that in a world built on transactions, this was the first thing that felt like it wasn't one. He finally pulled back, breathing hard, forehead resting against my chest. "If I keep going," he said, voice rough, "I'm not sure I'll be able to think about warrants in the morning." "You already don't," I murmured, combing my fingers through his hair. He laughed against my shirt, the sound muffled and almost young. "We have to stop," he said. "I know," I replied, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. I just needed to remember. I'm not made of case law. He lifted his head, looked at me, and for a moment there was nothing in his eyes but raw, unguarded want. Then his phone buzzed on the counter behind me. We both froze. He reached around me, grabbed it, glanced at the screen. His expression changed in an instant. The warmth drained out of his face, replaced by something sharper. "Calder?" I asked. "No," he said. "Worse?" He turned the screen so I could see. It was a news alert. Leaked affidavit names, bank analyst, and unknown organized crime figures in pension theft probe. Under it, a photo. Me, walking out of the federal building next to him. My stomach dropped. "Click it," I whispered. He did. The article loaded, full of sources say, and alleged ties, and high-ranking crime figure believed to be cooperating. Halfway down, a line made my vision blur. Internal documents suggest analyst Lowe may have acted as a conduit between bank leadership and criminal organizations, knowingly allowing funds to be diverted while maintaining plausible deniability. That's a lie, I said, voice thin. I know, he said. It doesn't matter if you know, I said. The world doesn't. They're already deciding what I am. The comments were already filling up. Knew. She was dirty. All bankers are the same. Lock them all up. He set the phone down, slowly. This leak came from inside, he said. Task force or bank. They're testing a story where I'm the bridge, I said. Bitter, the naive girl who looked the other way for a man with money. He stepped back, jaw tight. That's not going to stand, he said. I won't let them use you to soften their blow. How are you going to stop them? I demanded. You gonna buy the internet? Sue every commenter? He looked at me with a steadiness that made my breath catch. I'm going to give them a better villain, he said. What? I whispered. I'm going to tell them everything, he said. Names, dates, deals. Where the bodies are metaphorically buried and where the money's actually hidden. On record, under oath, with cameras. My heart pounded. You do that, I said, and they'll kill you. His mouth twisted. They're already trying to burn women in their beds, he said. Death threats are baked into the cake. He stepped back in, cupped my face again, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized had fallen. You asked me once what justice looks like, he said. Maybe it looks like the man who profited most standing in front of the bullets, instead of shoving someone like you in the way. I shook my head, tears spilling. I didn't ask you to die for me, I said. I'm not dying for you, he replied softly. I'm living like the man I should have been before I met you. You just reminded me he existed. The room felt like it tilted. You think I'm going to stand there and watch you walk into that alone? I asked. You won't be alone, he said. You'll have Calder, Odetta, Anders, half the city's nurses. You should save yourself. I'm not my father, I said, voice shaking. He died alone with a briefcase. I won't let you, or me, die like that. He smiled, sad and proud, all at once. Then we walk in together, he said, and we make sure, when this story is told, they don't get to pretend you were ever on their side. My phone buzzed again. On the counter, a text from an unknown number. Only 3 words. This time, tomorrow, live, Disset. No explanation. No sender name. Just a time. I looked up at him. Tomorrow, I said. They want a show. His jaw set. Then we'll give them one, he said. Our way, viewers. This is the cliff we're standing on. A live hearing. A leaked lie. A man ready to burn his old world down. And a woman who refuses to be the scapegoat they picked out for her. If you're still here, don't forget to like, share, and tell me in the comments. Would you walk into that room with him? Or walk away to save yourself? Because tomorrow, I had to make that choice. For real. At 9:59 a.m., the microphone was too close to my mouth, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The hearing room looked like every broadcast committee room you've seen on TV. raised dais, long wooden tables, flags, nameplates, cameras lined the back wall, like a firing squad. The little red light on the main camera blinked. 10, 9, 8. If you're watching this right now, you probably saw the headline before you ever saw my face. Bank analyst tied to mob-linked fund scandal. You probably already had an opinion. Before I say anything else, hit like if you're still here, because the version of this story you clicked on, it was written by people who never once had to look my father's handwriting in the eye. Ms. Ortiz, a staffer whispered at my shoulder. You're up first. Just read your statement into the mic. Then they'll ask questions. Easy for her to say. I glanced down the table. Odetta sat on my left, in a navy suit that had seen weddings and funerals. Oxygen tube. Gone. Bandages tucked under sleeves. Her eyes were clear and furious. On my right, Marcellus in a dark suit, no tie, face composed, hands folded. To most of America, he probably looked like every other billionaire they love to hate. Only I knew his heart was sprinting. Under the table, his pinky brushed my knee. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. The chairman rapped his gavel. This hearing will come to order, he said. We are here to examine alleged irregularities in the Riverside Workers' Benefit Fund, the involvement of De Rossi Capital, and potential criminal activity tied to the fund's management. Wrong word, I thought. Not irregularities. Theft. Lives. He cleared his throat. Our first witness, Miss Liriel Ortiz. Every camera light in the room shifted toward me. I thought of my father's letter in my bag, the smell of smoke in Odetta's hospital room, the way my mother's voice shook when she prayed over the phone the night before. I leaned into the mic. My name is Liriel Ortiz, I said. I'm a senior risk analyst at Hudson First Bank, and I need to start by saying the leaked affidavit got one thing right and almost everything else wrong. A murmur ran through the room. According to that leak, I went on, I acted as a conduit between bank leadership and organized crime. I didn't. I acted as a whistle. The reason some people are trying to paint me as anything else is because it's easier to blame one woman at a desk than a system full of men in corner offices. I saw Agent Klein in the second row, watching me with a look that wasn't quite approval, but wasn't contempt either. I walked them through it. How I found the mismatched deposits, the dead shell companies, the override codes. How my father's name appeared as if from the grave on old committee notes. I didn't cry when I talked about the robbery. I let my voice wobble once, and then settle. Not performance, just truth. They called it a random crime. I said, it wasn't. He died over numbers that didn't add up, and people who were counting on nobody checking the math. I glanced at the main camera just for a second. If you're watching this from a couch or a break room, I said, and you've ever been told, that's just how it is. When something felt wrong, you know that feeling in your chest right now. That's why I didn't walk away. One of the panel members leaned forward. Ms. Ortiz, she said. Did Mr. De Rossi ever ask you to conceal information? I took a breath. He asked me to buy time, I said honestly, to understand the scope before the worst people in this city did. He did not ask me to destroy anything. The people who wanted this gone didn't text me. They set an old woman's window on fire. A ripple went through the crowd. Are you referring to the attempted arson at Miss Harris's apartment? The chair asked. Yes, I said. Same fund. Same names. Same fear. They questioned me for another half hour about emails I'd sent, red flags I'd raised, why I'd gone to the vault with Odetta, why I'd stood next to Marcellus on those courthouse steps. At one point, someone tried to box me in. Ms. Ortiz, a senator said, you're asking us to believe you were involved with a man whose companies profited from this scheme, but that you yourself took no benefit. That's difficult to accept. I met his gaze dead on. I'm asking you to believe a woman can be in a room with money and say no, I replied. If that's difficult for you, that's your problem, not mine. For a heartbeat, the room was dead silent. Then I heard it. One low clap from the back. Odetta, ignoring the nurse at her side, smacking her good hand against the armrest once in approval. It broke the tension. A chuckle rippled through the gallery. I let out the smallest breath. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever said the thing you knew might cost you in a room full of people who'd rather you smiled and stayed quiet? And if you haven't yet, tap that subscribe button, because stories like this don't get told if we keep rewarding silence. They finally let me step back. Odetta went next. She didn't read a statement. She just talked about long nights in the hospital, paper paychecks, how the union rep had looked her in the eye and promised that fund would be there when your knees give out. Miss Harris, how you gonna tell a woman that and then sign her money into somebody's offshore playground? She demanded. The numbers don't lie. The people do. The panelists looked like they'd been slapped. Good. Then it was his turn. Mr. De Rossi, the chair said, you are appearing voluntarily. Yes, he said. Without immunity. Yes. Gasps. Calder's jaw clenched in the front row. He was not thrilled. Too late. Now, Mr. De Rossi, the chair said, are you prepared to name individuals you believe are responsible for the theft of funds from the Riverside Workers Benefit Fund? He didn't look at me. He looked straight into the main camera. I'm prepared to name everyone, he said, including myself. The air changed. He laid it out. The early days, the older men, the committee meetings, where my father's warnings were laughed off, the way his companies had been used as laundromats, and how he told himself restructuring meant redemption, when it really just meant rebranding the same theft in nicer font. He dropped names, not vague initials, names with titles and company logos. A former bank vice chairman, 2 board members, the security consultant, whose real job was making evidence disappear. Renzo Lucchesi, he said clearly, when they asked who'd been tasked with risk management. I watched Detective Anders in the gallery write that down like he'd been waiting years to put ink to it. Did you authorize any acts of violence to protect your interests? One panelist asked. No, he said. But I paid men who did. That's the same thing when you cash the checks. Why come forward now? Another asked skeptically. Why not 10 years ago? His eyes flicked to me, then back to the dais. Because 10 years ago, he said, the only people yelling were janitors and nurses, and men like Ms. Ortiz's father, and I was too busy getting rich off a system that treated their pain as background noise. She made me look at it. So did Ms. Harris. So did the men who tried to burn her alive to keep her quiet. He paused. I decided I'd rather be poor and hated for telling the truth than rich and hunted for the lie. The chairman studied him. Mr. De Rossi, he said, you understand this testimony can and will be used against you. I do, he said. And you still wish to proceed? He glanced at me, just for a second. Yes, he said. I do. Somewhere in the back, I knew Renzo, or one of his bosses, was watching this feed with murder in his eyes. Good. Let them watch. It was over 3 hours later. The cameras cut. People stood, stretched, buzzed. We stepped out a side door, with security flanking us. Calder barked into his phone. Agents clustered. Detective Anders made a beeline for one of them, with a piece of paper I suspected had LXN on it. Out front, reporters shouted. We didn't go out front. We were ushered down a service hallway that smelled like dust and old paint, out into a concrete loading area where a few unmarked SUVs idled. You'll both be under protection for a while, Calder said, running a hand through his hair. They're fast-tracking charges against half the names you dropped, and they'll squeeze you hard for more. There's talk of a deal. No guarantees. How bad? I asked. For you? He said, professionally scorched earth for a bit. No prison if I have anything to say about it. You'll testify. You'll help design restitution. You'll be on every panel they can drag you onto about ethics and reform. And him? I asked quietly. Calder hesitated. He just kneecapped his own empire on live television, he said. Cooperation buys leniency, not absolution. Best case? House arrest, heavy fines, permanent monitoring, maybe a short sentence. Worst case. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Marcellus stepped closer. Close enough that the agents looked away politely. How you doing? He asked. Like I just ripped my life open on camera, I said. You? Like I just burned the bridge to every man who used to call me for favors, he said. Regrets? I asked. His eyes softened. Only that I didn't do it sooner, he said. Before your father ever had to mail that letter. I swallowed. One of the agents cleared his throat. We need to move, folks, he said. Press is circling. Vehicles are ready. They started to separate us, me toward one SUV, him toward another. He looked at me like he wasn't sure when, or if, we'd stand in the same beam of daylight again. Wait, I blurted. The agents paused. I stepped into his space. This started with a woman's window being broken, I said. With my father's case file, my mother's fear, your money. It can't end with us walking in opposite directions like strangers. What do you want it to end with? He asked, softly. This, I said. I grabbed his lapels. and pulled him down. The kiss wasn't desperate, like in his office, or stolen, like in the hospital hallway. It was steady. A thank you, and a goodbye, and a maybe all pressed into the span of a few heartbeats. His hands cupped my face, thumbs brushing away tears I'd given up trying to hold back. He kissed me back with a fierceness that had nothing to do with possession and everything to do with letting go of the man he'd been. When we broke apart, the agents were studiously looking anywhere else. He rested his forehead against mine. "Whatever happens next," he whispered, "don't let them convince you you're the villain. You either," I said. He smiled. Small and real. "Too late for that," he said. "But I can live with being the villain, who finally did one right thing." They pulled us apart. Then he climbed into one SUV. I watched the door close, the tinted glass swallowing his outline. My phone buzzed as they loaded me into the other vehicle. A message from my mother. A photo. Her, standing in front of the TV at her friend's house, hand on the screen where my face was frozen mid-sentence. The caption, "I'm proud of you. Your father would be too." I let myself cry then, quietly, as the car pulled away. Not because I was sad, because something that had been clenched around my chest for years finally loosened. 6 months later, the city looked smaller. The headlines had shifted. Billionaire board members indicted. Former bank executives in handcuffs. Pictures of Renzo in an orange jumpsuit. Eyes dead. Jaw clenched. Detective Anders texted me once. "LXN, impounded. Guess your old woman was right. Again." Odetta testified with her arm in a smarter sling and a brighter suit. She became a symbol overnight. The grandmother who wouldn't move, talk, shows, called. She told them all to call the other retirees first. The restitution fund was real. Check amounts weren't huge, not compared to what was stolen, but they were enough to fix roofs, pay medical bills, let a few people breathe. My own life shifted. Hudson first put me on administrative leave with pay, then offered me a compliance role so far away from decision-making, it might as well have been exile. I turned it down. Instead, I found myself in a cheap office over a laundromat. A hand-painted sign. In the window, Community Ledger Project. Free help reading the fine print. People brought me everything. Rental agreements, retirement plans, weird loan offers, medical bills. I spent my days doing what my father had tried to do, translating the lies out of their contracts. Sometimes they paid me in cash, sometimes in food, sometimes in stories. It was enough. At night, I recorded this, not as testimony, as a warning, as a love letter to everyone who's ever been told, "That's just how it is." And yeah, as a story. Because if you've stayed with me this far, you deserve an ending. What about him? He took the deal. 2 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 8 on house arrest with strict conditions. Every dollar he'd made from anything tied to the fund went into restitution and community projects he couldn't control. The first time I saw him on the news after sentencing, he looked smaller. No tailored coat, no perfect tie. Just a man in a plain shirt, hands folded, accepting a punishment he could have dodged if he'd been willing to let me burn instead. "That's my favorite criminal," Odetta said from her recliner, watching beside me. "He finally did something useful with his sins." "Don't call him that," I said, even as I smiled. "Fine," she said. "That's your ridiculous man who finally picked a side." We visited him once, quietly. No cameras. Just a girl from the bank and a man from the wrong side of the ledger in a visitor's room that smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. He looked up when I walked in. The way his eyes lit up, just for a second, made the fluorescent bulbs almost bearable. "You cut your hair," he said. "You lost your tie," I replied. He smiled. "How's the laundromat office?" he asked. Loud. I said, "Honest. No glass walls." "Perfect for you," he said. We talked about little things. The old men, who came in with shoeboxes of receipts. The kids, who started bringing their parents' contracts to me because they'd seen my face on TikTok clips of the hearing. We didn't talk about what we'd lost. We already knew. At the end of the visit, when the guard cleared his throat, I stood. "So," I said, "house arrest after this, huh?" "Yeah," he said. "Bracelet. Check-ins. No late tonight strolls. You'll hate it," I said. "I'll be alive," he replied. That's more than Renzo can say when he keeps trying his old games inside. I wrinkled my nose. "Be careful." He stepped as close as the painted line on the floor allowed. "I will," he said. "You too. These people don't like being embarrassed. They'll look for a new scapegoat when the cameras fade." "Let them," I said. "I've got aunties and Odetta and the internet on my side now. They're scarier than you." He laughed. Then his face softened. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For not letting them write you as the villain," he said. "For not letting me stay one." I swallowed. "Thank you for stepping in front of the bullets for once," I said. "Even if some of them still hit us." We both looked down at his hands. He lifted one. The guard shot him a warning look. "1 second," he said. I stepped forward until my toes touched the line. He cupped my cheek with 2 fingers, just barely, like he was memorizing the shape of me through glass that wasn't there. "We're not done," he said quietly. "This, whatever this is between us. It doesn't end in rooms like this. It pauses." "You think we get a later?" I asked. Softer. "I think if the universe let me meet the only woman who ever told me the truth to my face, it's not cruel enough to stop there," he said. I smiled through eyes that burned. "Later then," I whispered. The guard cleared his throat again. We stepped back. As I walked out, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. A year after he walked out of that place into a smaller, supervised life, my phone buzzed during office hours. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. But trauma had taught me that unknown numbers change everything. "Hello?" I said. "Your security cameras are trash," Marcellus's voice said. "Do you know that man on the corner can see every client who walks into your office?" I spun toward the window. He was across the street. No suit, just jeans, a plain shirt, and a plastic band visible at his ankle where his pants rode up. The ankle monitor. But his smile, The same. You're not supposed to be this far from your apartment, I said, heart sprinting. Relax, he said. They approved trips to community partner organizations. I listed you. You told your probation officer. I'm a community partner? I asked, half laughing. You are, he said. You partnered with my conscience. I shook my head, biting back a grin I hadn't felt in months. Get up here, I said, before your bracelet starts singing. He crossed the street, looked both ways because apparently prison gives you survival habits, and climbed the stairs. When he stepped into my tiny office, he looked too big for it. He turned in a slow circle, taking in the battered filing cabinets, the folding chairs, the pay attention before you sign poster I'd printed on cheap paper. This is small, he said. It's enough, I replied. He looked at me then, really looked. Hi, he said quietly. Hi, I said. For a second, we just stood there, the hum of the laundromat below filling the silence. Can the first hug you? He asked. Yeah, I whispered. You can. He crossed the space in 2 steps. His arms wrapped around me, tight and warm and familiar in a way that hurt. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in soap and city and something that was just him. We stayed like that for a long time. No cameras, no microphones, no agents in suits. Just us. In a cheap office that smelled like detergent and paper. When we finally pulled back, I searched his face. How does it feel? I asked. Not being who you were. He considered. Like I'm carrying fewer ghosts and more groceries, he said. Boring. Terrifying. Worth it, I laughed. Then I cupped his jaw and pulled him down into a kiss that was neither desperate nor goodbye. Just hello, soft, steady, full of every maybe we'd deferred. He answered with the same care, one hand at my waist, the other at the back of my neck, holding me like something precious instead of something to hide behind. When we broke apart, foreheads touching, I smiled. This is the part where the audience wants to know if we live happily ever after, I murmured. He smiled back. We live honestly ever after, he said. We'll aim for happy on the good days. Viewers, if you made it all the way here, you already know this isn't a fairy tale. It's a ledger story. Credits and debits, debts and repayments, love and consequences. But if you've ever been burned and still chosen to trust again, you know that's its own quiet revenge. Outside, a client jingled the office door. I stepped back, smoothing my shirt, heart still racing. Ready to help some janitor outsmart a contract? I asked. With supervision, he said, lifting his ankle monitor a fraction. Court orders. I grinned. Then, welcome to the Community Ledger Project, I said. We pay in coffee and chaos. He chuckled. I'm rich in both, he said. I moved to the door, hand on the knob. Come on, Mr. Exton, I said. Let's go make sure nobody else's father dies. For numbers. They don't understand. He caught my hand for half a second, squeezed it, let go. I opened the door to the waiting client, the city noise, the next story, because that's the real quiet justice, isn't it? Not just punishing the people who broke things, but living in a way that makes it harder for them to break them again. If this story hit something in you, if you felt angry, seen, hopeful, or all three, go ahead and like this. Share it with someone who's been burned by the system. And tell me in the comments, what does justice look like to you in real life? Thank you for staying with me through every cliff, every kiss, every courtroom. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. I'll see you in the next story.